Hey guys, tonight we slip straight into the dim corridors of a world that's colder, darker, and way more secretive than your middle school textbook ever hinted at. You're standing right now, well, imagining yourself standing, inside a medieval fortress where the stone sweats at night, and every footstep echoes like someone hasn't paid their noise cancellation spell bill. Your breath fogs slightly, because of course it does, and somewhere deep inside this labyrinth, quiet conspirators are already passing messages faster than arrows in moonlight, and honestly, if you wander too far without a torch, yeah, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now in bed, let me know your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little corner of the internet stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move forward, the chill settling on your skin like fine dust. The fortress around you isn't one famous for grand battles or legendary kings. Instead, it's known for the things whispered behind its stone ribs. A real medieval castle wasn't just a place to stash soldiers and gold. No, it was a communications hub. You might picture messengers on horseback or carrier pigeons dropping letters like medieval spam, but inside these walls things get stranger, much stranger. As you walk, you glide your fingers over harsh limestone, feeling faint grooves carved there centuries ago. These aren't random marks. Rumour holds that some fortresses used coded wall scratches to pass secret instructions, a sort of medieval texting. Historians still argue whether the simplest of these were directions for guards, or more shadowy notes meant for spies slipping through the garrison at night. Either way, you're basically touching the world's oldest group chat minus the emojis. A soft shift in the air pulls you toward a narrow stairwell spiralling downward. Spiral stairs in castles often turn clockwise, supposedly giving right-handed defenders an advantage. But here, your steps spiral the opposite way, almost like the architect meant to confuse invaders. Or maybe, if you believe one particularly quirky fringe theory, to create a secret path accessible only to those who'd been initiated into a hidden order of couriers. Yes, that's a real theory. No, it doesn't come with a decoder ring, unfortunately. You descend, each step hollow and resonant, like tapping the shell of a sleeping giant. Down here is where messages truly moved. In many medieval strongholds, tunnels ran beneath the main keep. Some utility, some escape routes, and some, well, let's just say the official blueprints got fuzzy. You reach one such tunnel now, its low ceiling making you stoop. Thin light leaks from cracks in the stone, and the smell is a mix of earth, dust, and that vague, vintage dungeon aroma theme parks try to copy but never quite nail. Your hands brush the walls again, and this time you spot a small notch filled with wax. You lean closer, squinting. Wax-sealed hiding spots weren't uncommon. Merchants used them to stash money, monks used them for contraband letters, and rumour has it certain courtiers used them to pass everything from assassination hints to, "Hey, meet me by the falconry hut" notes. You pick at the wax gently and feel the hollow pocket behind it. Empty now, but unmistakably used. Someone once trusted this tiny cavity with a very big secret. A faint clatter echoes behind you. Relax, you're not about to be stabbed by a cloaked medieval cutthroat. Probably. You glance back and see nothing but dust motes drifting like tiny confused fairies, which feels appropriate because at least 3 medieval chronicles blamed suspicious events on invisible spirits. Very scientific. You press onward and find yourself entering a cramped chamber lit by a single iron sconce. Here, the fortress's scribes once worked, not the glamorous court historians who got to write about heroic battles, but the ones tasked with copying letters, recording supply lists, and occasionally smuggling coded messages in seemingly harmless inventories. A real historical trick involved embedding secret names inside the first letters of each line. You run a finger along a shelf where parchment once sat, imagining an undercover agent pretending to write about grain shipments, while actually calling for a coup. It's petty, but you wonder if they ever added doodles out of boredom. If I had to copy barley 3 barrels 50 times, I'd draw a dragon wearing a hat just to survive. A draft brushes your cheek, carrying a faint murmur, like distant conversation wrapped in cotton. Following the sound, you slip into another corridor. This one slopes downward, leading to a guardroom. Here, you find something you didn't expect. A small wooden device with slits, shaped like a medieval credit card reader. It's actually a primitive cipher board. Real ones existed, typically used to align strips of parchment containing fragmented phrases. When the slits lined up correctly, the hidden message revealed itself. You imagine a nervous steward trying not to drop the thing while decoding a message like, "The Duke knows, move quickly," or, knowing medieval pettiness, "Tell Geoffrey his stew tasted like sadness." You pass beyond the guardroom into the outer wall walkway, and from here you can see the courtyard below, silent except for a dangling rope swaying in the breeze. That rope isn't decorative. Castles sometimes use pull cords to signal allies hiding outside, a silent Morse code of tugs and knots. Some fortresses even had messenger boys stationed along walls like living signal towers, which sounds like a terrible summer internship. Leaning against the battlements, you take a slow breath. The view is serene, but beneath it lies that ever-present hum of conspiracy. In this world, every shadow could hide a messenger, every footstep could carry rumour, every stone could hold a secret, and you're only at the beginning of this long, winding night. You slip back down from the battlements, letting the night settle around you like a cloak someone forgot to wash. The air thickens with spice, smoke, and a touch of something sharp, almost metallic. You follow that scent, feet padding softly along the uneven stones until the walls widen and the darkness thins. Ahead, lanterns glow like tiny embers scattered through an enclosed courtyard. Only, this isn't a courtyard at all. It's a market, one that shouldn't exist at this hour. You step into the dim bustle, where merchants whisper instead of shout and canvas stalls muffle the wind. This is the quiet market, the one that pops up after sundown, when respectable citizens pretend to be asleep and less respectable ones pretend to be respectable. And here, tucked between bundles of dried figs and stacks of pottery, you notice merchants leaning close, trading herbs wrapped in waxy leaves and clay jars sealed with twine. It looks innocent enough, until you see the little painted symbols, a scorpion here, a wilted lily there, a crescent moon with a droplet hanging beneath it. Historians still argue whether medieval poison markets were truly organised, or whether later writers exaggerated them to make the era sound spicier. But there were ingredients, real, documented ones, sold for purposes no one dared admit aloud. Henbane for visions, nightshade for medicinal sedation, and that powder from imported toadskins that definitely wasn't safe for smoothies. And you, walking past them now, get a faint itch on the back of your neck, like the herbs themselves are judging your browsing choices. A tall woman in a hooded cloak stirs a mortar rhythmically, though you can tell she's paying more attention to the people than her mixture. When your gaze lingers too long, she flashes you a polite but pointed smile, the medieval equivalent of, "Hey, don't blow my side hustle." You nod awkwardly, as if shopping for allegedly toxic substances is your normal Tuesday night. To your left, a hunched man unfolds a scrap of parchment. It looks like a recipe, if recipes involved ominous shapes and ominous instructions and, yep, ominous margins filled with doodles of skulls. The fringe theory goes that certain markets hosted unofficial poison clubs, where nobles sent proxies to learn how to sabotage rivals by slipping curious powders into wine. Realistically, most deaths back then probably came from bad hygiene, questionable meat, or the medieval belief that refrigeration was for people with weak character. But that didn't stop everyone from assuming foul play whenever a baron dropped dead after dinner. You pause at a stall draped with bundles of rosemary and sage. These at least smell comforting, like someone tried to invent medieval aromatherapy and accidentally stumbled into witchcraft branding. A merchant waves a sprig under your nose and says, "Keeps away sickness, spirits, and uninvited dinner guests." You're fairly sure only one of those is true. But the mainstream fact is that certain spices, cinnamon, cloves, saffron, were so valuable in the Middle Ages that owning them made you look suspiciously wealthy. Enough so that, yes, entire conspiracies sprouted around who smuggled what through which port, and why the king's steward suddenly had enough saffron to fill a pillowcase. Historical pillowcases were probably awful, but that's beside the point. You inhale slowly, taking in the swirl of scents, earthy roots, bitter leaves, sweet dried fruit trying its hardest to mask the darker aromas. Somewhere behind you, two merchants whisper, their words too soft to decipher, but their tone unmistakably secretive. You don't want to pry, but your ears betray you anyway, leaning in without your permission. One of them mutters, "He wants it before the feast." The other replies, "Then tell him the wrist doubles." A pause. "And the price?" A knowing chuckle. "Triples." You resist the urge to walk faster. Nothing like overhearing casual medieval plotting to pep up your evening. You drift deeper into the market where the lanterns grow sparser and the stalls more discreet. Here you find small clay vials arranged in neat rows. Most are labelled with simple markers, dots, lines, tiny painted shapes. You lift one bottle and feel its weight, heavier than water, lighter than oil. When you tilt it, something sluggish slides inside. Maybe it's just thick syrup, maybe it's something that once crawled. You put it back carefully, like it's a sleeping snake that charges extra for biting. A man with ink-stained fingers watches you with mild interest. He's probably a scribe, moonlighting as a vendor of things the church would definitely frown upon. "Rare tinctures," he says casually. "Used for healing, or not." That last part he whispers, like he's offering a bonus feature. You smile weakly and step away, because you have precisely zero desire to become a customer testimonial. Near the far edge of the market, you notice a stall selling simple pottery bowls. Innocent, right? Except the insides are coated with colourful glazes, greens, yellows, whites, that glint strangely in the lamplight. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval glazes contained lead, and not the harmless unless you lick it kind. People sometimes used them intentionally to create slow-acting effects, pretending an enemy just fell ill. The merchant hands you a bowl proudly. You set it back like it's radioactive pottery from Etsy. A soft laugh escapes you, quiet but involuntary. Conspiracies, it turns out, aren't always grand or brilliantly orchestrated. Sometimes they're just petty people with access to suspicious ingredients. A gust of wind dimples the lantern flames, and with it comes a whispering wave of unease. The crowd shifts, cloaks pull tighter, transactions speed up. Something's changing. The market is folding itself back into silence. You step aside as stalls close, jars vanish beneath cloth wraps, and merchants melt into the shadows as if the night is swallowing them whole. No guards appear, no bells ring, but clearly the hour has come when even conspirators decide to call it a night. You glance once more at the emptying stalls. Somewhere among all this, you realise real plots once brewed. Small ones, large ones historians still argue were exaggerations. But the fact remains. This quiet market, or markets like it, supplied tools that shaped alliances, toppled rivals, and made nobles extremely paranoid about their dinner courses. You turn away, letting the darkness reclaim the space behind you. The path ahead glows faintly, as if inviting you toward the next secret of the night. You follow the narrow path leading away from the disappearing market, your steps soft on the dirt as the lingering scent of herbs fades behind you. Ahead, a low glow pulses from a squat stone building attached to the outer wall of the fortress. It looks harmless, quiet, unassuming, the kind of place you'd assume holds extra firewood or a few tools somebody borrowed in the 1200s and never returned. But as you draw closer, you catch the faint rustle of parchment, the clink of metal clasps and the hushed scrape of something being tucked away a little too quickly. You slip inside, ducking beneath an arch so low it seems designed to test your upper scalp strength. Candlelight washes the room in buttery gold. This isn't a tool shed at all. It's a monastic scriptorium, a workspace for monks who spent their days ink-stained and stooped over parchment, turning blank pages into worlds. Normally these places hum with quiet devotion, maybe a little complaining about cramped wrists, but at night they become something else entirely. You stand at the threshold of a place where information was power long before TikTok discovered the concept. The monks here aren't chanting or copying psalms. Instead, several move briskly between shelves, sliding scrolls into niches that look too hidden to be part of any official archive. A heavy oak door stands closed at the back of the room, reinforced with a bar thick enough to keep out both intruders and overeager interns. A pot of ink simmers near a brazier, the air heavy with the earthy smell of oak gall, standard medieval ink ingredient if you ever want to add lightly toxic writing fluid to your bucket list. A robed figure notices you lingering and gives a quick nod. Not welcoming exactly, but not hostile. More like he's acknowledging that yes, you've stumbled into the part of the fortress where the real gossip lives. You drift closer to a long table piled with manuscripts. Some are neatly rolled, others splayed open, and at least one has a suspicious wine stain shaped vaguely like a disgruntled pigeon. Monks weren't supposed to drink while writing, but, well, humans gonna human. One of the manuscripts catches your eye. A ledger, with dense columns and tidy handwriting. At first glance it looks purely administrative. Lists of supplies, donations, shipments. But as you scan the names, you notice patterns. Same donor repeated 3 times in the same month. Oddly high numbers of candles delivered during a period when the monastery supposedly had only 5 monks. And an entry at the bottom, labelled simply, Cousins from the South, hospitality for 7 nights. Except the monastery didn't have any cousins, at least none they admitted to. Historians still argue whether monastic scribes deliberately hid political scandals inside their ledgers, or whether these oddities were just clerical quirks. But there are confirmed cases of monasteries acting as information hubs, copying secret letters, storing incriminating documents, even sheltering fugitives while pretending they were pilgrims in contemplation. Basically the medieval version of clearing your browser history. You turn a page and find a loose scrap tucked between sheets, its edges uneven, the ink darker than the surrounding text. You lift it carefully. The handwriting is rushed, the letters slightly crooked. It reads, "The Earl travels disguised. Stop him before the equinox." No signature, no seal, nothing that would make this legally useful, but plenty that would make it politically explosive. A monk materializes beside you, his sandals whispering against the floor. He doesn't snatch the paper, which is nice. Instead, he taps it with one finger and murmurs, "Misfiled." You can't tell if he means it sincerely, or if that word is code for something like, "Go away before you learn too much and we have to add you to the list." You place the scrap back where you found it, because you have no interest in starring in a conspiracy documentary as the mysterious person who vanished after reading a note. As you move through the room, you spot small wax tablets stacked near the wall. Monks use these for quick notes, erasable, convenient, and unfortunately prone to melting if someone placed them too close to a candle. A few tablets bear faint impressions of messages hastily smoothed over. You tilt them to catch the light, and ghostly letters emerge. He suspects, and on another, change tomorrow's sermon. You pause. Changing a sermon might sound like the most harmless conspiracy ever, like getting someone to swap the church playlist. But in the Middle Ages, sermons could influence entire communities. Monks and priests were some of the only literate figures around, and people trusted their words like divine push notifications. A subtle shift in message that could plant ideas, sway loyalties, or ignite fear. Word of mouth spread faster than plague fleas, after all. At the far end of the room stands a chest bound with iron. Its lock gleams in the firelight, and a monk kneels before it, muttering as he fits a key into place. The lid opens, releasing the scent of old parchment mixed with something smoky. Inside are scrolls sealed with bright crimson wax, the fancy stuff reserved for high-status correspondence. You glimpse a crest stamped into the wax, but not long enough to identify it before the monk lowers the lid again. You lean against a lectern, trying to take in everything around you. The quiet shuffling, the coded documents, the feeling that every surface hides a secret. And then comes your quirky tidbit, the kind that makes you squint and go, "Okay, but why?" On the corner of one desk sits a small wooden carving shaped like a fish. It's cute, a little goofy, and completely out of place among the heavy manuscripts. But according to one obscure chronicle, certain monastic groups used carved fish as signals. Place it facing left, and it meant a secret meeting was happening that night. Facing right, and someone was under suspicion. Hide it entirely, and it meant, for the love of all that's holy, destroy the letters. Scholars debate whether these claims are legitimate or just embellishments from a bored monk with an overactive imagination. Either way, you cannot unsee the fish's judging little stare. A bell gives a soft, distant toll, and the monks begin extinguishing candles one by one. You realize it's time for you to leave, not because anyone forces you out, but because the atmosphere shifts. The moment the lights dim, the room feels less like a workplace and more like a vault preparing to swallow its secrets again. You step out into the cool night air, the door closing quietly behind you. The fortress looms overhead, its walls full of stories, but behind you is a scriptorium where truth has been folded, filed, and sometimes finessed for centuries. And ahead lies another shadow waiting to be peeled back. You move along the fortress walkway, your footsteps making that soft crunch-thud rhythm that always feels way louder when you're trying to be sneaky. The moon hangs low, a pale coin stuck in the sky, and the air tastes faintly of iron, like someone left armor out to dry after a long day of heroic sweating. The path curves toward an open yard dimly lit by torches, their flames bending in the wind, as though eavesdropping on whatever's about to happen. You step inside the training grounds, wide, mostly empty, and quiet enough that even the shadows seem to hold their breath. But this isn't the bustling daytime yard where knights strut about comparing helmet plumes and pretending to be humble. No, this is the midnight yard, where a select few knights gather away from prying eyes. This is where unofficial oaths are sworn, oaths that never make it into the chivalry manuals or court poetry, mostly because they would have made medieval PR teams break out in hives. You pause near the edge of the field, half hidden behind a rack of spears. They lean together like gossiping co-workers, their metal points catching bits of moonlight. A small group of armoured figures circles the centre of the yard. They're not duelling, they're talking, quietly, tightly, like they know exactly how far their voices carry. A knight steps forward, his helm tucked under his arm. He looks around, and you instinctively hold your breath even though you're basically invisible. He lifts a hand over a small wooden chest set on a table. Whatever's inside must matter, because every other knight stiffens, like someone cued dramatic music internally. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Knightly orders did have secretive subgroups, not the Hollywood hooded cult chanting under the moon type, more like informal alliances formed to protect certain families, influence royal decisions, or quietly coordinate military action. Some were harmless, some were, well, spicier than expected. You inch closer, your boots sinking slightly in the packed dirt. The knights open the chest, and inside lies a circular emblem, bronze, heavy, etched with a pattern you don't recognize. It's not the crest of their kingdom, it's not any known order. According to fringe theories, the fun ones the historians groan about, certain knightly circles created their own private symbols to identify members loyal not to the crown, but to secret agendas. You're not saying these guys are plotting a coup right now, but nobody opens a chest at midnight to admire matching jewellery. One knight speaks in a low melodic voice. The vow binds by deed, not by title. You can't help but roll your eyes just a little. Medieval conspirators really loved dramatic phrasing. You half expect him to add, "And may our group chat remain forever sacred." They each touch the emblem in turn. The gesture is solemn, almost tender. You notice something else. Each knight's gauntlet has a small carving near the wrist, identical, barely noticeable unless you're searching for it. That's no coincidence. That's branding. The group disperses slightly, but not fully. The leader, broad-shouldered, clearly the one who gets the bigger horse, begins whispering orders. You catch fragments. Tomorrow's patrol route must change. Keep the steward distracted. Do not let him near the archives. Your eyebrows rise. This isn't some harmless midnight fan club. This is logistics. Every conspiracy worth its parchment involves logistics. You shift your weight, and a pebble crunches under your heel. You freeze so hard your spine practically fuses. One knight turns sharply. He peers into the dark, visor glinting. You hold perfectly still, channeling your inner medieval statue. After a tense moment, he looks away. You let out a silent exhale, the kind that could power a small windmill. The meeting concludes, but instead of leaving, several knights remain. One pulls out a dagger, not to attack but to carve something into the wooden table. You squint, but the marks are too shallow to decipher. Maybe it's a code, maybe it's graffiti, maybe he's just bored and stabbing furniture is cheaper than therapy. Historians still argue whether knightly codes inscribed in wood were real or just embellishments by chroniclers who needed extra drama to meet their word count. You step farther into the yard as the knights drift away into the darkness, dissolving like smoke. Only one remains, a younger knight seated on a low stone wall, helm beside him, staring at the sky with the posture of someone contemplating life choices. His armour is scuffed, his boots muddy, and he sighs heavily enough that you feel it from 10 feet away. You approach slowly. He doesn't notice until you're just close enough that ignoring you becomes socially impossible. He startles a bit. "Didn't expect company," he murmurs, voice weary. His hand moves reflexively toward his sword, but he doesn't draw it. You shrug in a friendly, "Please don't stab me, I'm just vibing" way. He lets out a tired chuckle. "Long night," he says. "Longer day tomorrow." Something inside you wants to ask about the Secret Order, what they're planning, why they're rewriting patrols, how he feels about moonlit loyalty ceremonies, but you sense he wouldn't answer, and honestly, he looks like he already has about 7 too many things weighing on him. So instead, you just sit beside him, letting the silence settle. The training yard feels different now, less ominous, more human. The torches flutter, crickets chirp their sleepy chorus. Somewhere in the castle a door bangs shut, followed by someone muttering curses in Old French, which somehow feels ruder than modern curses. The knight finally speaks again. "People think we spend our lives fighting, but most of the battle is politics." He shakes his head. "I'd rather face a dozen enemy spears than one scheming. Courtier. Fair. Extremely fair." He stands, brushes dust from his greaves, and gives you a short nod before walking off toward the barracks. Something small falls from his belt. A scrap of parchment. You pick it up and read just 2 words before the ink smudges under your thumb. "Tonight confirmed." Yeah, nothing suspicious about that at all. You tuck the scrap into a crack in the table, no need to keep souvenirs from a conspiracy you didn't sign up for, and step out of the training yard. Behind you, the torches continue to sway, whispering secrets you'll never fully hear. Ahead, new shadows gather, carrying you deeper into the fortress's quiet heart. You follow a slanted stone corridor that narrows as it climbs, the walls squeezing inward the way old buildings tend to do when they've spent centuries settling, shifting, and rethinking their career choices. The air changes too, growing sweeter, warmer, tinged with something that reminds you faintly of burned honey and wet copper. It's the kind of smell that whispers, "Someone in here has been mixing stuff they probably shouldn't." You round the final bend and find a wooden door propped open by a stack of abandoned scrolls. Beyond it lies a chamber full of clutter, glass vessels, bubbling pots, soot-coated walls, and shelves sagging under the weight of ingredients you can't name but instinctively distrust. This is no ordinary workshop. This is the Royal Alchemist's lair. And judging by the faint glow emanating from the table in the centre, tonight is one of the spicy nights. You step inside cautiously. The place crackles with energy, as if the air itself is holding its breath. A tall figure in a heavy robe hunches over a boiling concoction. His sleeves are scorched at the edges. His hair is doing that "I've been near explosions" look, and his hands move with frantic precision. He mutters to himself, occasionally stopping to scribble a note or poke something with a metal rod. You can't tell if this guy is a genius or 3 minutes away from blowing a hole in the upper keep. A stack of letters sits beside him, the topmost one stamped with the royal seal. Ah yes, your mainstream historical fact of the night. Medieval rulers really did employ court alchemists. Not just for turning lead into gold, spoiler, they never quite pulled it off, but for creating dyes, developing medicines, distilling alcohol, crafting cosmetics, mixing explosives, and occasionally whipping up health elixirs that probably tasted like regret. Many kings and queens invested heavily in alchemy, hoping it would grant them longer life, stronger armies, or at least one cool parlour trick to show visiting nobles. Some rulers grew obsessed, leaning on their alchemists as unofficial advisors, which fueled rumours about potions that influenced decisions, or, more dramatically, altered destinies. As you watch, the alchemist drops a pinch of powdered something into the pot. The mixture flares, bright blue before settling back into a simmer. You take one step back. Safety first, even in imaginary medieval conspiracies. The sound of boots scuffs behind you. You glance over your shoulder to see a royal guard standing stiffly at the door. He looks uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else, maybe even doing inventory. The alchemist notices too. "Tell His Majesty," the alchemist announces without turning, "that the infusion is nearly stable." The guard clears his throat. He wants confirmation. Tonight. "Of course he does," the alchemist mutters. "He always wants confirmation before the moon crosses the tower." That catches your attention. The moon, still hanging low, peeks through a slit window, illuminating a thick tome lying open on the desk. Its pages are packed with diagrams, star charts, symbols, and what appears to be a drawing of a chicken with a crown. You're not going to ask. The alchemist wipes his hands on a cloth and finally notices you hovering like a particularly well-behaved ghost. "Ah," he says with mild interest. "You're not supposed to be here." You shrug with an expression you hope conveys. "Neither are half the people I've run into tonight." He returns to his work, pouring the glowing mixture into a ceramic bottle. The liquid sloshes thickly, casting strange ripples across the walls. The bottle is stoppered, sealed with wax, and placed reverently inside a padded case. "The king believes this will grant him strength," the alchemist murmurs, mostly to himself. "Endurance, immunity." He sighs. Whether it works, historians still argue. You imagine future scholars in heated debates. Was it a real elixir? Did the king just start jogging and drink more water? Why didn't more people write things down more clearly? Honestly, all valid points. You drift toward a shelf cluttered with oddities, rocks that sparkle in suspicious ways, dried plants tied with string, jars containing substances in a range of unsettling colours. One jar holds a powder so red it looks as if colour itself melted and congealed. A label beneath it reads simply, "For matters of persuasion." Quirky tidbit incoming. Some medieval alchemists believed certain stones or minerals carried magical influence. Not literal mind control, but an ability to encourage agreement. People carried them into negotiations like luck charms. Others claimed special powders, when burned, created smoke that calmed or intimidated rivals. You glance at the red powder and make a silent note never to inhale anything that shade. The alchemist claps his hands once, startling you slightly. "Done," he announces, voice tight with exhaustion. But the potion is only half the conspiracy. The belief in it? That's the other half. He gestures at charts pinned to the wall, stars, lunar cycles, notes scribbled furiously. If a king believes a potion grants invincibility, that belief changes how he rules, makes him bold, reckless. He taps one paper. And if his enemies think he has such power, well, fear is an ingredient too. You nod, appreciating the unexpected philosophical moment from a man whose left eyebrow is still smouldering from earlier. The guard steps forward to collect the case, clutching it like it contains either destiny or a stomachache waiting to happen. As he exits, the alchemist slumps into a chair with a groan that echoes through the chamber. "Every ruler wants assurances," he murmurs. "But real power?" He holds up an empty vial. It's never in the bottle, it's in who controls the story. He smiles, tired, sharp, and maybe a little unhinged. You explore the chamber a final time. A chalkboard stands in the corner, lines of equations snaking across it. Next to this brilliance is a doodle of a rooster wearing armour. Balance is important. As you step back into the corridor, the door creaks shut behind you. The air cools again. The burnt honey smell fades. But one truth lingers. Behind every king's confidence stood someone like that alchemist, mixing, testing, scheming, and shaping fears into influence. And tonight, you've only just brushed the surface of the secrets moving through this fortress. You leave the alchemist's workshop behind, letting the corridor stretch ahead like a long exhale. The walls feel cooler now, calmer, as if relieved you didn't accidentally ignite anything. Your footsteps echo softly as you wind downward into the lower reaches of the fortress, toward the gatehouses, the stables, and the places where people come and go with a little too much urgency. The smell reaches you first. Damp leather, horse sweat, and the faint metallic tang of travel dust. Then you hear it, tense voices drifting around the corner, clipped and hushed. You follow the sound until the corridor widens into a chamber lined with travel gear. Cloaks hang from hooks, saddlebags rest in messy piles, maps lie half-rolled on a table, as though someone bolted mid-sentence. Only a few lanterns burn, their light flickering across the stone floor like restless shadows. A pair of guards stand near the rear entrance, but even they look uneasy. Fidgeting, glancing down the hall every few seconds. Something is wrong. You can feel it in the air, sharp and electric. This is the diplomatic wing. Envoys slept here. Negotiators met here. Letters bearing seals that changed kingdoms were carried through this very passage. But tonight, the place feels hollow. Too hollow. Like someone has scooped the centre out of the evening and left only the shell. You move closer to the table where a parchment still lies open. It's a travel itinerary. Names, dates, destinations. Several lines have been crossed out in thick strokes. One entry at the bottom reads simply, "Envoy departed at dusk." The ink is smudged as if the writer's hand shook, or as if someone tried to erase it quickly. Historians still argue whether medieval, vanishing envoys were the work of shadow courts, foreign agents, or simply the dangers of travel. Bandits, washed-out roads, overly territorial swans, those birds take nothing from nobody. But the chronicles are clear. Envoys did disappear, and when they did, the political consequences rippled through kingdoms like a dropped stone in a still pond. You run a finger over the crossed-out lines. Each one represents a journey that never finished, or never truly began. Behind you, a man in a heavy cloak enters the chamber, muttering curses under his breath in that poetic medieval way that sounds elegant even when someone is absolutely losing it. He stops, noticing you. "Oh," he says, startled. "Didn't expect. Company." You give him your best, me neither, but here we are, look. He sighs, rubbing his temples. "Another one's missing." You tilt your head. "Envoy," he explains. "Left before sunset. Should have arrived at the river crossing by now, but no sign, no message, nothing." You want to offer something comforting, but comfort is in short supply around here. He gestures toward the table. 3 in a month. 3. His voice drops. Someone is intercepting them. It's the certainty in his tone that unsettles you. Not guessing, but knowing. He lifts a sealed letter from the table and holds it up. This was supposed to be delivered tonight. Quietly. Unofficially. He taps the seal. Now we have to assume it's already in the wrong hands. He sets the letter down and steps away, leaving you alone with the creeping suspicion that this fortress is less a castle and more a spiderweb. Threads everywhere. Someone tugging at them invisibly. You wander deeper into the wing. A smaller side room catches your eye, one with a pair of travel cloaks draped over chairs, as though the envoys wearing them had stepped out only briefly and never made it back. A half-eaten loaf of bread sits on a plate. A wine cup stands tipped over, the stain long dried. A chessboard occupies the corner mid-game, and just above it, pinned to the wall, is a map. You approach the map and notice tiny carved marks along the edges. Some indicate safe houses, some point to known hazards, flood zones, dangerous forests, and places where wolves had a reputation for believing horselegs were gourmet, but a few marks look newer, fresher. Almost as if someone updated the map secretly, adding routes that envoys actually took rather than the ones publicly announced. A quirky little detail from history. Some diplomatic messengers carried split messages, half written on parchment, half memorized. The idea was simple. If the envoy vanished, the enemy would only have half the puzzle. Some scribes even intentionally wrote decoy phrases, trusting the envoy to correct them verbally. You glance at the map again, imagining a messenger rehearsing lines under their breath, trying not to mix up peaceful negotiation with possible invasion, because that would be an awkward mistake. You reach for the table beneath the map and find something else, an object so small you almost miss it. A pebble, perfectly smooth, carved with a tiny spiral. You turn it over in your palm. Envoys sometimes carried tokens of passage, simple coins or stones used as proof they had reached certain checkpoints. But this one hasn't been marked. It hasn't completed any journey. Someone placed it here before leaving, but never returned to claim the next. You put it back gently. A rustle from the doorway behind you pulls your attention. A woman enters, tall, wrapped in a deep red cloak. Her boots are muddy, and her face carries the look of someone piecing together a puzzle with too many missing pieces. "You shouldn't be in here," she says, though her tone isn't stern, more tired, resigned. You give a tiny shrug. It's becoming your brand tonight. She steps forward and lowers her voice. "He didn't take the main road." She gestures toward the map. None of them did. Someone warned them off it. Someone inside these walls. You feel it then. The creeping realization that the vanished envoys weren't random victims of bad weather or opportunistic bandits. Their disappearances were part of something coordinated, something precise. She leans closer. If you hear whispers about the Midnight Court, ignore them. They listen for people who listen. The Midnight Court. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke. You store it in the back of your mind with all the other clues. One day they'll connect. Probably, hopefully. Maybe. The woman slips a folded note into her sleeve and disappears down the corridor, cloak trailing behind her like a blood-red shadow. You wait until her footsteps fade before leaving the room. As you step back into the lantern-lit hallway, the fortress feels a little colder, a little emptier, because somewhere out there, maybe in a forest, maybe by a river, maybe in a cellar you haven't discovered yet, an envoy has vanished into the dark, and the night around you deepens, thick with conspiracies that have only begun to reveal their edges. You leave the dim diplomatic wing behind, letting the fortress corridor pull you upward once again. The ceiling arches overhead, thick and heavy with centuries of soot from torches long extinguished. The climb feels steeper than before, as though the fortress is growing taller with each breath you take. The air thins, growing cooler, sharper, and threaded with a faint scent of incense. Sweet at first, then musky, then unmistakably metallic, like heated brass. You follow that scent to a chamber perched high in one of the watchtowers. Its door stands open just enough to leak warm amber light across the floor. You slip inside and find yourself standing beneath a domed ceiling painted with constellations and swirling celestial beasts, dragons, stags, phoenixes, and one creature that suspiciously resembles a llama with aspirations. Welcome to the astrologer's chamber. It's quieter than the other rooms you visited tonight. Not silent. Never silent in a place this old, but filled with a soft rustling, like parchment breathing. The walls are covered in charts pinned neatly in rows, star paths, planetary diagrams, lunar calendars, and a few symbols that look like someone tried drawing zodiac signs from memory after one glass of wine too many. A fire crackles in a brazier. In front of it, hunched over a table, sits the royal astrologer, robes spilling around him like spilled ink, silver hair tied back with thread, posture somewhere between ancient wisdom and "my back regrets everything." He lifts his gaze as you enter, and his eyes gleam with the kind of knowing that makes you suddenly aware of how many embarrassing moments he might be able to predict. "Ah," he murmurs, "the Wanderer." You blink. Is he talking about you personally, or is that just what astrologers call everyone? He gestures you closer with one knobby hand, then turns back to the parchment in front of him. The page displays a chart of tonight's sky, planets marked by careful strokes, angles measured meticulously. The court believes these stars tell them what they wish to hear, he says, tapping a constellation shaped like a crooked spear. But stars tell only what they must. You ease closer, careful not to knock over any of the fragile tools arranged on the table. Brass compasses, delicate rulers, an astrolabe gleaming like a polished gear of the cosmos. It's mesmerizing, like a medieval version of a very expensive math hobby. Mainstream historical fact for you: medieval courts absolutely relied on astrologers, not just for predicting harvests or personal horoscopes, but for major decisions, marriage alliances, war declarations, coronations. Kings waited for favourable alignments to crown themselves. Armies paused campaigns because Mars was sulking in the wrong quadrant. Even treaties were signed under specific lunar phases because nothing says peace like celestial bureaucracy. You glance at one chart filled with tiny annotations in red ink. They're not predictions, they're instructions. Delay the envoy's departure, move the treasury audit, shift the feast by 3 days. Each directive corresponds to a star position. You raise an eyebrow, the astrologer notices. "Yes," he says, "these aren't prophecies, they're suggestions the court believes are prophecies." He offers a thin smile. The stars are a convenient scapegoat, you know, safer than admitting human agendas. He stands with a grunt, walks toward a tall window slit and peers out at the dusky horizon. 3 envoys gone, a queen who fears her council, knights meeting at midnight, and a king, he pauses, a king who believes the moon favours him tonight. That comment hangs in the air like a lantern suspended by a fraying rope. You drift to another chart pinned nearby. Its parchment is softer, older. The edges crumble lightly under your fingertips. It displays the conjunctions that supposedly preceded great upheavals, rebellions, assassinations, wars. A quirkier footnote scribbled in faded ink claims, "When the moon eats the sun, trust no baker." You decide not to question that. Astrologers had their own internal logic, and maybe one particularly shady baker made a lasting impression. The astrologer shuffles through a pile of scrolls, muttering things like, "No, that's last year's catastrophe," and "Where did I put the treason chart?" until he unearths a long tube sealed with violet ribbon. He opens it, unrolls the parchment carefully, and spreads it across the table. You lean in. It's a map of the night sky, but not tonight's. This one is dated nearly a decade ago. "This alignment," he says, tapping two intersecting lines, "marked the rise of a faction that should have died with its founder. Yet they linger, quietly, patiently." You absorb the words slowly. He lowers his voice. Historians still argue whether celestial readings actually influence conspirators, or whether conspirators simply use the readings as excuses. But I have seen enough to know this. He taps the parchment again. Ambition needs only a sign, not accuracy. A sudden gust enters the room, scattering small papers like startled birds. You chase down one that lands at your feet. It's a tiny slip covered in neat handwriting. "If the envoy does not return before the second moonrise, seal the west gate." You look up at the astrologer, but he's already watching you with that same quiet, unnerving awareness. "Information," he says slowly, "rarely vanishes. People do. But knowledge? Knowledge leaves trails." You tuck the slip back onto the table. A strange instrument catches your eye. Something shaped like a cross between a sundial and a soup ladle. The astrologer notices and chuckles lightly. "Star spoon," he says. "Well, that's what the apprentices call it. Real name's too long." He hands it to you. It's surprisingly heavy, cold against your palms, used to measure stellar heights. But some believe it can detect ill omens. You tilt it. It does nothing, unless you count a faint clink that could also just be your imagination. He shrugs. "A quirky superstition, nothing more. Still, the court likes when I wave it around. Makes them feel I've consulted the sky properly." You give him a small smile. "Medieval science. 10% math, 20% symbolism, 70% dramatic hand gestures." The astrologer returns to his charts, eyebrows tightening. "The moon enters the third house soon. Those who act under its shadow believe they're hidden, but they forget." He lifts his astrolabe, and its brass face flickers with reflected firelight. "Even shadows have shapes." That sentence sticks with you. You step back from the table, letting the room settle again into its soft, crackling stillness. The astrologer doesn't stop you as you leave. He barely looks up, consumed once more by the silent stories written in the sky. You ease into the corridor, feeling the cool night air slide down from the high window. The fortress feels different now, as though you're no longer trudging through random mysteries, but walking along threads woven between them. And somewhere, beneath constellations the astrologer reads but never fully trusts, conspirators are moving according to a plan that stretches far beyond the walls around you. You descend the tower stairs with the astrologer's last words still drifting around your mind like stubborn smoke. Even shadows have shapes. Easy for him to say. He has charts and cosmic geometry to back up his metaphors. You're just trying not to trip on steps polished smooth by centuries of anxious royal feet. The castle corridors seem narrower now, more secretive, as if the stone itself has tuned into the fortress-wide whisper network. You follow a torch-lit hallway that slopes downward and then veers sharply left, funneling you toward a quieter wing. Too quiet, in fact. No guards, no scurrying servants, not even a distant cough from someone trying not to sound sick in a century where medicine is basically flavoured guesswork. You push open a heavy oak door and step into a long room lined with desks, ink pots, quills, parchment rolls, everything neatly arranged, almost obsessively so. But that's how scribes operate. They're the human version of I alphabetize my spice rack for fun. This is the Scribes Guild Hall, daytime home to the official record keepers of the court. But tonight, it has absorbed the hush of conspiracy. The air smells faintly of ink and beeswax, with a hint of dust that either hasn't moved in a century or has been deliberately swept into patterns. Hard to tell. You move between desks, running your fingers along the smooth wood. Scribes copied everything. Royal decrees, tax records, love letters they absolutely weren't supposed to sneak read, and treaties so long they made your eyes water just imagining them. But scribes also did something far more powerful. They edited reality. A lantern flickers near the back of the room. Someone's here. You freeze, then relax slightly when you see it's only one person. A lone scribe sits hunched over a document, quill dancing across the page with the bored elegance of someone trained to make handwriting look effortless. He doesn't notice you at first. His lips move silently, repeating each word from the exemplar book propped open beside him. Then he pauses, dips his quill, and writes a line that makes you blink. Not because it's scandalous, but because it's wrong. He's copied the tax decree faithfully, except for one number, a subtle shift that reduces a noble's dues by just enough to avoid suspicion, but still enough to matter. You step closer and the scribe finally notices you standing over his shoulder. He startles so hard his quill nearly flies into orbit. "Oh!" he gasps, clutching his chest. "By all the saints!" You walk quieter than a guilty conscience. You give a gentle shrug, trying to put him at ease. He eyes you for a moment, then sighs deeply, like he's been holding that breath for hours. "You didn't see that," he says quickly, which of course is exactly what someone says when you very much did see something. He looks at the ink-stained number and mutters, "It's only a small change, a tiny favour for someone who promised a future favour." He shrugs one shoulder. Historians still argue whether scribes deliberately altered records or whether errors simply accumulated over time. Personally, he gives a wry smile, a little of both. You glance at the shelves along the wall, hundreds of scrolls and books. Any one of them could contain a truth polished into a lie or a lie quietly promoted to truth. That's the power scribes had. They were the medieval version of controlling the narrative. The scribe notices your interest and beckons you toward a cabinet tucked into a shadowy corner. It's smaller than the others, closed with a modest latch. Nothing fancy. But when he opens it, the contents make your stomach buzz with curiosity. Inside lie several slim scrolls tied with dark ribbon. Documents that look identical at first glance, but shimmer differently under the lantern light. He removes one and unfurls it halfway. "This," he says in a low voice, "is an alternate version of a treaty the king never signed. It states terms he never agreed to, promises he never made." You lean closer. The parchment is filled with elegant lines, perfect seals, convincing signatures. Anyone glancing at it quickly would accept it as official. He rolls it back up. "Forged," he says, "not clumsily, professionally. These were meant to be found by the right people at the wrong time." You feel the weight of that. A false treaty, strategically revealed, could ignite a conflict or prevent one, depending on who held it. The scribe gestures to a small box on the lower shelf. He opens it, to reveal shallow wax blocks with tiny impressions etched across them. Some symbols repeat, some don't. "Signature stamps," he explains. "Duplicates of noble seals, illegal of course, highly illegal." He clears his throat. "But useful." You raise an eyebrow. He offers a faint grin, which is the medieval equivalent of saying, "Look, I don't make the rules, I just forge them sometimes." You wander to the next desk where a sheet of parchment sits drying. It looks ordinary, but when you tilt it under the lantern, faint shadows appear, letters written in lemon juice or vinegar, waiting for heat to reveal them, invisible ink. Not quite CIA-level work, but surprisingly widespread among medieval scribes who wanted plausible deniability or just really liked pranks. A quirky tidbit jumps into place. Some scribes hid personal jokes in the margins, tiny drawings, sarcastic comments, coded symbols. You spot one now in the corner of a copied charter, a doodle of a cat wearing a crown. You smile. The scribe notices and shrugs. "Boredom," he says. "Also, I really like that cat." Another scribe enters suddenly, laughing quietly, carrying a stack of documents. He stops when he sees you. "Oh," he says, "a visitor." You nod. He gestures at the desks. "We've been revising the land registry. Again." He sounds delighted. You wouldn't believe how easy it is to shift borders by a few feet on parchment. Move a boundary line here, a mark there, and suddenly two nobles are fighting over a field neither of them ever cared about. He leans closer conspiratorially. Best part, they blame each other, never the parchment. You can't help imagining an entire war erupting because someone mislabeled a cabbage patch. He sets the papers down and adds, "Knowledge is malleable. If you write it down, people trust it. If you alter it, they rarely question it." The first scribe nods solemnly. "Words shape kingdoms as surely as swords." You step back, absorbing the atmosphere, the quiet scratching of quills, the shuffling of paper, the faint crackle of lantern flames. There's no shouting here, no clashing armor, no dramatic midnight oaths. But the conspiracies woven in this room might be more powerful than any sword fight. Records define reality, and reality, when adjusted by just a few strokes of ink, can be manipulated into anything. As you leave the hall, the scribes return to their work, altering, editing, preserving, rewriting. Silent puppeteers shaping the stories kings want told and the truths they want forgotten. The door closes behind you with a soft click, leaving you alone in the dim corridor. So far tonight you've encountered missing envoys, secret oaths, and a king drinking questionable potions. Now you've found the people who quietly rewrite the script behind it all, and somewhere deeper in the fortress, more secrets wait. Whispered beneath the rumble of wheels and the rattle of something far more sinister. You leave the scribe's hall with the faint smell of ink still clinging to your clothes, drifting down a dim corridor that slopes toward the lower yards. The air grows thicker, warmer, damper, and you catch hints of smoke and rot wrapped inside a breeze that's far too steady to be natural. A rhythmic creaking rises in the distance, wood on stone, wheel over ground, a sound you recognize even before you want to. Plague carts. Not the dramatic kind from paintings with skeletal figures ringing bells and shouting warnings. These are quieter, smaller, pulled by weary mules and guided by men who look like the night has weighed on them for years. You step into a courtyard illuminated only by the moon and a pair of smoky torches that barely hold back the gloom. The carts line up near an iron grate that leads to the burial pits outside the walls. But tonight, the pits are not the most unsettling thing here. It's the people whispering around the carts. Figures in cloaks murmur in tight circles, glancing over shoulders, shielding their faces. Some wear crude masks, cloth soaked in vinegar or herbs, the medieval version of, "This probably won't do anything, but it feels better than nothing." Others keep their hoods low. A few scribes stand among them, a steward, a stable hand, even a woman wearing the insignia of a minor noble house. Strange mix for an hour like this. Stranger still that none of them look sick. You step closer and feel the heat of the torches brush your skin. The nearest cart is filled with covered shapes, bodies wrapped in linen tied neatly, respectfully. But not all of them belong here. One shape is smaller, tightly wrapped, too tightly. Historians still argue whether some medieval outbreaks were manipulated, spread intentionally, or at least allowed to spread for political advantage. The evidence is murky. Accusations flew freely whenever nobles started dying at inconvenient times. Some said rival houses poisoned wells. Others blamed merchants who supposedly carried tainted goods. One chronicler even insisted a bishop hoarded plague victims to unleash during negotiations. That last one is probably more creative fiction than fact, but you never know with bishops. A man, tall, gaunt, eyes sunken like he hasn't slept in months, steps away from the crowd and leans on a cart. He seems unaware of your presence until you shift your weight on the gravel. His head snaps up. "You're not with them," he says softly. You tilt your head, gesturing vaguely toward the whisperers. He shakes his own. "No, they're expecting someone else. Someone who knows how this started." Your eyebrows lift. He glances around and then lowers his voice to a gravelly hush. 3 deaths in the upper ward, 2 in the barracks, 2 more by sunrise, mark my words. He rubs his forehead. But that's not natural pace. Something's pushing it faster. He hesitates, then adds, "Or someone." A shiver creeps along your shoulders. Not fear, just the realization that you've walked straight into another layer of conspiracy, thicker and more tangled than the scribe's quiet forgeries or the knight's moonlit vows. He points to a second cart. "Look there." You approach carefully. Beneath the linen, the shape is thin, too thin for a plague victim. You lift the corner of the cloth, just an inch. A bundle of herbs spills out, not a body at all. The man steps beside you. They're hiding things in the plague transports now. Herbs, letters, weapons, anything they can move without inspection. Nobody wants to open a plague cart. His voice twists bitterly. Convenient, isn't it? You let the cloth fall back into place. Convenient indeed. A muffled argument breaks out behind you. You turn to see 2 cloaked figures speaking harshly, their words sharp and tense. "You told me it wouldn't spread this far. Only meant to target the upper court. Then why are the barracks infected?" A pause. "Because someone tampered with the mixture." You feel the ground tilt beneath you slightly, not physically, but narratively. Someone tampered with it, meaning there was a mixture meant to infect, or distract, or punish. Quirky historical tidbit. Medieval people believed plague could spread through anything. Bad air, cursed objects, constellations, even overly dramatic dreams. But a few fringe theories claimed small cults tried to weaponize disease by smearing infected items on door handles. Actual evidence? Spotty at best. But the fear alone was enough to spark accusations, riots, and desperate measures, including burning suspects' belongings, or suspects themselves. One of the cloaked men turns and notices you, his eyes narrow. You step back into the shadows, pretending to be extremely invested in a nearby wall. Classic move. Works every time. The men lower their voices and shift toward the gate, carrying the herb-filled bundle with them. The crowd disperses in jagged fragments. First the steward, then the scribes, then the noblewoman. Each slips away like spilled ink soaking back into the fortress. You're left with the tired man and the carts. He exhales shakily. "I shouldn't have shown you," he whispers, "but the truth rots faster when hidden." You ask, wordlessly, what he thinks is really happening. He looks toward the fortress, expression pinched with dread. This isn't plague, not all of it. He touches the cart gently. Some people died because of it. Yes. Others. He swallows. Others were killed before the cloth ever wrapped around them. Your skin prickles. He lowers his voice further. Someone wants chaos in the court. Enough fear to justify drastic decisions. Enough grief to cloud judgment. He steps back, straightening his cloak. Be careful walking the lower halls tonight. The dead aren't the only ones being moved. He takes the reins of one cart and pulls it, toward the gate. The wheels creak into the darkness. Another cart follows. Soon the yard empties, leaving only torches that crackle and gutter, their flames slowly bowing to the chill. You stand there for a long moment, listening. Wind. The soft squeal of a hinge. The distant murmur of prayer from somewhere high in the keep. And beneath it all, the faint rumble of conspiracy threading through stone, weaving itself deeper into the night. You turn back toward the entry archway, the fortress rising above you like a great breathing creature. You've walked into secrets carried in oaths, scribbled in hidden ledgers, brewed in alchemical bottles, charted among the stars, and now ferried beneath linen shrouds, and there are still more shadows to uncover. You slip away from the plague yard, letting the grim weight of the scene fall behind you as the corridor narrows again. The fortress seems to inhale around you, cold stone pulling the night's air inward, exhaling something darker, something threaded with the scent of salt and damp rope. You follow that scent instinctively, winding through the lower halls until you reach an archway that opens onto a sloping passage. A faint roar drifts up from below, wind, waves, and the irregular groan of wood shifting under heavy loads. Of course. You're headed toward the docks. Most medieval fortresses didn't have them, but this one sits close enough to a river bay junction that cargo and messengers could travel by boat. You descend until lantern light spills across the smooth floor, and the walls widen into a long stone platform. Beyond it, dark water laps at the mooring posts, and boats bob gently as though whispering secrets to one another. But it's not the boats that catch your attention. It's the voices, dozens of them, murmurs layered together like overlapping currents. You edge closer and see clusters of people standing among crates, barrels, coils of rope, and stacks of cargo that have been pushed aside to create makeshift meeting spaces. These aren't sailors. Not all of them, at least. Some wear merchant coats. Some wear noble colours. Some dress plainly, but with an air of confidence that says they're used to moving in circles far above their pay grade. And none of them seem to want to be seen. Welcome to the merchant cabals, the nighttime heartbeat of this fortress's economy, and apparently its conspiracies. A trio of merchants stands near a stack of sealed crates branded with a stylized serpent. Two speak quietly while the third keeps watch, eyes darting toward the stairwell you just descended. You duck behind a barrel, pretending to admire nothing in particular, which is one of your emerging talents tonight. Their conversation drifts toward you in broken fragments. The rebellion won't last unless we fund both sides just in case, and the tariffs will shift the moment. You blink, funding both sides. A classic move, really. Merchants in the Middle Ages often played politics like chess, backing different factions to ensure profit no matter who ended up on the throne. But hearing it whispered here adds a pulse of danger to the air. Your mainstream historical fact: wealthy merchant guilds did quietly bankroll rebellions, bribe officials, sponsor private militias, and manipulate trade routes to pressure nobles into agreements. Some guilds wielded more power than minor lords. Salt merchants controlled food prices. Textile traders influenced fashion and thus status. Ship owners controlled the literal flow of information, and some, like the ones in this dimly lit chamber, used their networks to push political change faster than any royal decree. You circle the crates, keeping your steps light. A nearby barrel has its lid cracked open, revealing a pile of silver ingots wrapped in cloth. Silver. Not a small amount either. Enough to buy loyalty, swords, or several very fancy goats. You quietly close the lid, because loose silver in a conspiracy setting feels like a safety hazard. Down the dock, a pair of sailors pulls a tarp off a long crate. Beneath it lies a row of crossbows, perfectly maintained, polished, illegal in these quantities. One sailor mutters, "These weren't on the manifest," and the other replies, "Nothing on the manifest's real, that's the point." Excellent. Completely normal activity for a fortress at midnight. You move toward a group huddled near a mooring post. One man, dressed in embroidered robes that scream "I have money but want to look humble," gestures sharply at the water. "The nobles think they control the flow of grain," he says, "but without our ships their granaries are empty by winter." Another replies, "We could raise prices quietly, make it look like a bad harvest." Quirky historical tidbit. Medieval merchants sometimes stage false shortages by holding grain in storage until panic drove up the price. Sometimes whole cities blamed famine on natural causes while the true cause sat stacked in warehouses just outside town. You glance at the crates behind these men and wonder how many shortages in this region have been manufactured on purpose. Closer to the water's edge, a woman stands with her cloak pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her voice is level, controlled. "The Queen's Council suspects sabotage," she says. "If they trace it back here—" "They won't," interrupts another merchant. "The scribes owe us favours, and the knights are too busy chasing shadows." You feel that comment like a tug on a thread. Knights in midnight meetings, scribes altering records, missing envoys, a king drinking dubious potions, and now merchants funding something, everything, everyone. The pieces are stacking. The woman sighs, rubbing her frown lines. "Very well, then we proceed. The shipment leaves before sunrise. If it reaches the rebel camp intact, they'll have the leverage they need." Another whispers, "What about the counter-shipment?" She nods. "That goes to the crown." Both sides. "Of course." Something thumps near your feet. You look down to find a weighted sack that's rolled loose. It's tied with rope and sealed with wax. You nudge it gently. The sound inside is unmistakably clink-like. Coins. Lots of them. A merchant nearby notices you, his eyes narrowing. You step back, pretending you are just stretching your legs in a cool, casual, definitely not suspicious way. He watches you, then turns to the others. "We have too many ears here. Move to the lower pier." The crowd shifts quickly, dividing into smaller groups and disappearing down the walkway. In moments, the docks feel emptier, still humming with tension, but quieter. One figure, however, remains behind, a bookkeeper by the looks of him, scribbling into a ledger. He mutters to himself, "If this goes wrong, they'll burn the records and blame the plague." He dips his quill. "If it goes right, they'll pretend it was the king's idea all along," he shakes his head. "Either way, my handwriting carries the blame." You step closer. He looks up, startled. "Oh," he says, then squints. "You're not here for inventory, are you?" You give him a look that says, "Take a guess." He sighs. "Well, don't touch the crates, don't listen to the arguments, don't ask about the duplicate manifests." He pauses. "And if anyone asks, I was never here." He returns to his ledger. You catch a glimpse of the page. Columns, names, symbols. Some entries crossed out, others underlined. One line reads, "Funds allocated, torch keepers." Another, "Payment cleared, night riders." And one, circled twice, "Envoy route compromise successful." You swallow hard. That ties the docks to the missing envoys. The bookkeeper slams the ledger shut, startled by a loud whistle from the lower pier. He snatches his things and hurries off, leaving you with a final thought tossed over his shoulder. When merchants start plotting, The crown should worry. The dock's quiet. Only the river speaks now, slapping softly against the stones, carrying the night toward a distant shores. You stand alone among crates of silver, hidden weapons, false manifests, and whispers still lingering like fog. The conspiracy beneath this fortress is no longer a rumour. It's scaffolding, structure, intention, and you're only halfway through the night. You leave the river docks behind, letting the lingering scent of tarred rope fade as you climb into a quieter, more echo-prone corridor. Your boots whisper across cold stone, and somewhere far above, a bell tolls faintly. One of those soft, apologetic bells that sounds like it wishes it could go back to bed. You turn down a hallway lined with narrow windows that leak silver moonlight across the floor, each stripe like a quiet invitation deeper into the fortress's secrets. Eventually, voices drift toward you, soft, melodic, layered, singing. You follow the sound until you reach a long wooden door cracked open just enough for a warm glow to spill through. You push gently, and the hinges sigh as you step into one of the castle's many chapels. The air is thick with incense, beeswax, and something earthy. Old wood, old stone, old stories. Sunken candles flicker along the walls. Rows of benches stretch toward a raised platform where a small choir rehearses in gentle harmony. Their voices blend like warm honey, smooth, angelic, steady. But there's a tension under the surface, a faint edge. A few singers glance at the door as you enter, not startled, but assessing, as if they're used to people listening who aren't supposed to listen. You slip into a shadowed corner, letting the notes flow over you. It's beautiful, soft enough to calm your nerves, rich enough to give the walls goosebumps. But this is no ordinary choir rehearsal, because every so often one voice dips, low, rhythmic, deliberate, out of sync just enough to break the harmony, but timed perfectly to signal. Another voice answers, matching tone, matching cadence. A third shifts pitch like a cue. It hits you. They're using the choir to communicate, your mainstream historical fact of the night. In medieval courts, choristers, especially those who travelled or belonged to royal chapels, often doubled as informants. They had access everywhere. Masses, feasts, private meetings, royal chambers. They delivered messages disguised as hymns, carried rumours across regions, and sometimes even acted as low-level spies under noble patronage. After all, nobody suspects the tenor. You watch now as one chorister, tall, hooded, too still for the music, steps slightly out of formation. His gaze fixes not on the choirmaster, but on a man seated near the front, cloaked in deep blue and wearing a ring bearing the crest of a noble house. The tall singer adjusts his breathing, then slips a coded phrase into the next verse, replacing a single Latin word with another that doesn't belong. You don't know Latin, but you know a substitution when you hear it. The noble nods once. You raise your eyebrows. That's not exactly subtle, but subtlety seems to be optional in this fortress. A cloistered side passage catches your eye, a narrow hallway behind the choir loft. Curious, you slip into it. The sound softens instantly, muffled by thick stone. A few steps in, you find a wooden lectern with parchment sheets laid out. At first glance, they look like hymn notes, but closer inspection reveals tiny dots drawn above certain lines, like a speckled code. You lean closer. Each dot pattern corresponds to a letter, an early musical cipher. Historians still debate how common musical ciphers were in the Middle Ages. Some claim they were rare curiosities. Others insist certain monastic orders used them frequently for secret messages hidden in chant. Either way, you're staring at evidence that someone here takes the idea seriously enough to annotate their sheet music with espionage. You pick up one sheet. A phrase has been circled in faint charcoal with a note beside it. Tonight, third verse. You glance back toward the choir. They're rehearsing the second verse now, which means something important is about to happen. You slip back into the chapel just as the choir exhales together and begins the third verse. The air thickens, charged with that sense of impending stuff the night keeps throwing at you. Two voices shift, again deliberately. The tall singer lowers his tone, shaping his words with too much precision. The alto beside him changes timing, holding a note a fraction too long. The noble leans forward. The coded message unfolds in sound. The choir master either doesn't notice or pretends not to. His eyes stay fixed on his parchment, but his shoulders tense. Maybe he's in on it. Maybe he's terrified of being in on it. You try to catch the meaning through the cadence, listening for patterns. Every third word sharpens slightly, carrying weight. 2 words repeat in close succession, like a warning. You can't decode it perfectly, but you feel the urgency pulsing through the choir like a hidden drum. At the end of the verse, the noble stands, nods once more, and slips out a side door with a cloak swish that screams, "I definitely have a secret meeting to attend." The tall singer exhales sharply and wipes sweat from his brow. Subtle work is apparently hard on the nerves. As the choir breaks for water, you move toward another corner, this one holding a storage cabinet for vestments and music. The door hangs slightly open. Inside, among folded robes and candle stubs, sits a small wooden box. Curiosity gets the better of you, as always tonight, and you nudge it open with your finger. Inside lies a small dagger. Not ornate, not royal. Simple, practical, deadly. The handle is wrapped in choir cloth, pale blue with a stitched gold border. One of the singers owns this, carries this, hides this. You close the box carefully, your heartbeat thudding with a mix of intrigue and, "Wow, that's concerning." A soft voice at your shoulder makes you jump half a foot. You shouldn't be in here. You whirl to face a chorister, a young woman with sharp eyes and a steady expression. She doesn't look angry, just resigned. Like she's said this too many times. You offer the tiny shrug you've given so many conspirators tonight. She sighs. "Look, the choir is useful. Some nobles expect information in exchange for patronage. Some expect warnings. Some expect..." She gestures vaguely. "Things I'd rather not describe," her voice lowers. "We carry messages because nobody suspects us. We hear things because nobody thinks we're listening. And sometimes..." She glances toward the hidden dagger box. "Sometimes we do more than sing." You remain quiet. She straightens her robe. "If anyone asks, the choir is practicing for the Feast of St. Bridget. Nothing more." Then she adds, almost gently, "Be careful. This fortress has too many ears tonight, and not all of them listen kindly." She returns to the others as the choirmaster claps for attention. The singers regroup, voices rising in warm harmonies as though nothing dangerous hides beneath their notes. But you know better now. Some voices carry secrets, some carry warnings, some carry blades. You slip back into the corridor, letting the song fade behind you. Another thread in the fortress's web tightens around the night. Knights swear quiet oaths. Merchants move silver in the dark. Scribes rewrite truths. Astrologers hide meanings in stars. And the choir carries messages no one else can. You step deeper into the hallway, guided once more by the castle's pulse, the steady beat of secrets waiting in the gloom. You follow the corridor outward from the chapel, letting the last traces of warm harmonies fade behind you until the fortress feels hollow again, wide, cold, and pulsing with secrets that don't care much for melodies. A draught snakes along the stones, carrying with it the scent of old parchment, dust, and something faintly sweet. Beeswax, maybe. You recognize the smell because it clings to every room where important letters are stored, or forged. The corridor widens, then splits. One path leads toward the royal wing, bright torches, polished floors, guards with that "I haven't slept in 2 days" posture. You avoid it immediately. The other bends toward narrower passages, the type scribes and couriers use when they don't want to be asked why they're awake at this hour. Naturally, you take that one. The hallway dips slightly before opening into a chamber so cluttered you half expect a medieval librarian to leap out and shout about overdue scrolls. Shelves climb the walls, stuffed with rolled parchments tied with bits of string. Several desks sit beneath them, quills abandoned midline, cooling candle stubs drowning in their own wax, and stacks of half-dry sheets arranged in dangerously leaning towers. This is the letter-making room, where official correspondence begins, and sometimes ends up altered beyond recognition. A low murmur drifts from the far side. You ease around a shelf and spot 2 men bent over a long table. One wears a scribe's robe, the other wears clerical garb bearing the papal insignia, except it's faded, uneven, almost hand-painted. You squint. That insignia isn't quite right. Ah, there it is. The forgers. Your mainstream historical fact. Forged papal letters were a very real medieval problem. People used fake papal bulls to start crusades, claim ownership of land, demand tithes, and even justify wars. Entire regions mobilized armies based on documents the Pope absolutely, definitely, categorically never wrote. When news finally reached Rome, the typical reaction was something like, "We authorized what now?" Tonight, something similar is happening mere feet away. The clerical impostor whispers, "The seal needs to look cracked. Too perfect and it'll raise suspicion." The scribe nods, heating a small stamp over a candle flame. You watch as they press wax onto a parchment, then imprint a ring into it. A ring so large it practically screams, "Notice me, I'm important." But the emblem inside is subtly wrong. A shift in the cross, a curve where there shouldn't be one. Small differences, but enough that anyone who really studied papal seals would blink twice. Of course, the people who will receive this letter probably won't look twice. You creep closer, pretending to examine a bookshelf, but absolutely eavesdropping like your life depends on it. "What does this one say?" the scribe asks. The impostor clears his throat dramatically and reads aloud, "By holy authority, let it be known that the righteous must reclaim the lost relics of Saint Aurelius from the heathen lands to the east. All who join this sacred mission shall earn absolution." He rolls the parchment slightly. You see the heading clearly now. A crusade letter. Your eyebrows lift so hard they practically relocate to your scalp. A forged crusade letter isn't just illegal. It is historical fan fiction with deadly consequences. "Will they believe it?" the scribe asks. The impostor smirks. "Of course. The nobles want an excuse to move troops. The merchants want access to foreign ports. The knights want glory. We're merely giving them what they already wish." You exhale slowly. That checks out. A shocking amount of medieval chaos began because someone said, "Hey, I think God wants us to fix this political issue." And everyone else responded, "Well, if God said so, we should definitely sharpen our swords." You drift to another table where an older parchment lies unfolded. It's yellowed, edges curled, ink faded, but still legible. Also clearly a forgery. The script flows too elegantly. No footnotes, no smudges. Definitely not real. The heading reads, "To all faithful subjects of the realm," a classic opener. But halfway through, the message shifts tone abruptly. Less blessing, more, "Stir trouble for us, please." Very on brand for conspirators. As you scan the lines, a quirky detail catches your eye. A doodle of a tiny fish in the margin, like a secret artist decided the Pope needed aquatic flair. You remember the carved fish in the monastic scriptorium earlier. Coincidence? Maybe. Or callback? Definitely. A symbol used by a particular faction, perhaps. One that keeps showing up where whispers grow thickest. A shuffle behind you makes you freeze. Someone else has entered the room. You duck between shelves, peeking through a gap. A robed courier, breathing hard, approaches the table. Sweat beads across his brow. "Is it ready?" he whispers. The impostor hands him the forged letter with a flourish. "Deliver this to Lord Renwick before dawn. Tell him the church expects immediate action." The courier nods, tucks the scroll into a leather tube, and sprints off like a man late to his own conspiracy. The scribe watches him leave with mild concern. If he's caught, he won't be, the impostor interrupts. The routes are compromised already. The envoy's missing. Merely a side effect. You stiffen. Side effect? So the envoy disappearances tie into this too. The impostor paces. The king will hear of the letter by noon. By then the nobles will be arguing, the knights will prepare to mobilize, and the merchants will shift prices. Everything moves when a crusade begins. The scribe hesitates. And if someone proves it false? The impostor laughs softly. By the time anyone proves it, the consequences will already be real. He's not wrong. Fake letters often sparked irreversible movements. Medieval people trusted wax seals more than eyewitnesses. The men continue their work, preparing more forged documents, some shorter, some disguised as simple messages. One reads, "By papal decree, the steward is relieved of duty." Another, "The Queen's Council is to be investigated." A third, "Exchange of relics authorized. Proceed quietly." You're not sure which is worse, starting a fake crusade or quietly firing high-ranking officials via counterfeit church mail. You move toward the back of the chamber, where discarded scraps lie in a basket. Some are mistakes, over-smudged ink, poorly pressed seals, misspelled Latin. You pick up one fragment and study it. Those loyal to the midnight court. The rest is torn away. There's that phrase again. The midnight court. It keeps surfacing like a conspiratorial buoy refusing to sink. Footsteps approach. You drop the scrap back into the basket and slip behind a shelf just as the scribe tidies his tools. The imposter extinguishes candles. They begin shutting down the room. You take that as your cue to exit. Slipping through the side door, you step into a stairwell so quiet you can hear your heartbeat. Torches flicker faintly, their flames thinning with the hour. As you ascend, the cold air is bracing, sweeping away the heat of the forge room candles and leaving a sharper clarity in its place. You've walked through whispers encoded in chants, alliances carried on silver ships, cartloads of secrets disguised as plague victims, and now letters powerful enough to start wars without a single sword drawn. The higher you climb, the more certain you become. Whatever threads tie these conspiracies together, they're pulling tighter around the crown itself. And the night is far from over. You climb the stairwell until it ends in a tall, arched landing that feels too ornate for a mere corridor, but too neglected for an official hall. Tattered banners hang from the ceiling, deep crimson, age-frayed, their crests long faded. A draught sweeps through, carrying the chilly scent of midnight stone and the faintest hint of perfume, like someone wearing expensive secrets passed through minutes before you arrived. The hall ahead stretches long and narrow. Moonlight spills in through high windows, silvering the floor in thin ribbons. But it's the figure standing near the far end who catches your attention. A traveller. At least that's what he looks like. Cloak dusty, boots muddied, hood pulled low. He stands before a tarnished mirror, adjusting his collar with a nervous energy that doesn't match the leisurely rhythm of a wanderer. His movements are deliberate, practiced, as though he's preparing to be seen. Something in your gut nudges you. This isn't a random traveller, this is someone preparing to be recognised, and maybe, as the outline foreshadowed, to claim something. He turns, and for a moment you catch the glint of something metallic beneath his cloak. Not a weapon, a signet ring. The kind worn only by nobility. Old nobility. He slips it onto his finger, twists it into place, and draws a steadying breath. You step closer, keeping to the shadows. Then he speaks, quietly, to himself. Tonight, he murmurs, they see me as I should have been seen years ago. Well, that's not suspicious at all. Your mainstream historical fact arrives neatly on cue. Medieval Europe saw a surprising number of returning heirs, people appearing out of nowhere claiming to be long-lost sons, daughters, nephews or cousins of vanished royals. Some were genuine. Many were elaborate imposters supported by political factions eager for a puppet with a good backstory. A few sparked major rebellions simply by insisting they were someone important. This man might just be one of those. The traveller adjusts his hood again and begins pacing. He mutters rehearsed lines, repeating them until the cadence is smooth, confident. I escaped the mercenaries. I sought refuge in the mountains. I have returned to claim my birthright. You wince slightly. It's not a bad performance, but he puts too much emphasis on birthright, like a kid auditioning for a school play. He stops pacing and stares at the mirror again, jaw tight. Behind him, the reflection in the mirror shifts slightly. At first, you think it's your imagination, but no. The shadows near the mirror seem to move independently from the torchlight. Then a voice, feminine and sharp as a needle, floats out from behind a column. You're placing too much weight on the revelation. Speak more softly. The traveller jumps nearly out of his cloak. A woman steps forward, tall, elegant, dressed in layers of deep charcoal fabric embroidered with threads that catch the moonlight, like spider silk. She carries a scroll, sealed and stamped. She studies him with the precision of someone checking the sharpness of a blade. If you announce yourself too boldly, she continues, they'll suspect. They'll suspect anyway, he mutters. Good. A thin smile. Suspicion means they'll listen more closely. Ah, a strategist, a handler, someone who shapes the narrative before the narrative shapes itself. She hands him the scroll. Everything they need to confirm your identity is inside. Letters recovered from a monastery, witness accounts, birth records. You raise an eyebrow. Birth records? You've just spent several sections watching scribes alter documents like warm-up stretches. You're pretty sure those records were edited harder than a royal portrait. The traveller takes the scroll reverently. Will they believe it? The woman taps the ring now gleaming on his finger. With that, they'll believe what they want to believe. A soft, eerie truth settles into the air. People in power often accept impostors when the impostor is convenient. Quirky historical tidbit. One false heir in Portugal gained so much support that an entire village celebrated him with feasts, only to discover later that he was literally a shoemaker's apprentice. But he still almost won because, as locals noted, he had excellent posture and the right sort of eyebrows. Not kidding, eyebrows mattered. You edge closer. The woman begins outlining the plan. Enter during the changing of the guard. Head straight to the Queen's oratory. Her advisors will be present, but I will ensure they ask only the questions you practiced. And if someone challenges me, he asks, voice cracking slightly, then we lean on the rumour. You blink. The rumour? The woman continues. Word is already spreading that the Queen's late brother had a hidden heir. A child smuggled out during the siege. Some believe he died. Others believe the envoys who vanished recently were carrying evidence of your survival. Your breath catches. The missing envoys. Again, it all loops back. The traveller grips the scroll tighter. And the midnight court? What if they interfere? The woman's expression tightens. They won't. Not tonight. They're occupied with other matters. You feel that like a cold whisper down your spine. Other matters? In this fortress? With everything already happening? Fantastic. The woman adjusts his cloak, straightens the hood, and pats his shoulder. Professional, practiced, but tinged with something like sympathy. You'll do fine, she murmurs. Just remember the details. Your childhood home, the scar on your wrist, how your father spoke. Details are the anchor. Even if they're false, he whispers, especially when they're false. She steps away, leaving him alone with the mirror again. He looks at himself, face pale, eyes determined but trembling. It must work, he says quietly. I have nowhere else to go. There's vulnerability in his voice, a crack in the armour of conspiracy. Maybe he's an imposter. Maybe he's genuinely the lost heir. Historians still argue over cases like these hundreds of years later. Some heirs proved real only after their deaths. Others fooled entire kingdoms until the moment they slipped. You walk past the edge of the moonlight and catch his reflection catching you. His eyes widen, then soften into weary resignation. You heard all of that, didn't you? He asks. You shrug. What else is new tonight? He sighs. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but if the truth won't give me a place in this world, his voice trails off, then perhaps the story will. Before you can respond, the strategist's voice calls again from the far door. It's time! The traveller pulls up his hood, squares his shoulders, and heads toward his uncertain destiny. Half courage, half deception, fully wrapped in a cloak of manufactured legitimacy. You remain in the hall for a quiet moment, watching his shadow shrink down the corridor. A false heir, or a real one, has now stepped into the night's web, and the fortress, already churning with schemes, just gained another thread in its tapestry of secrets. You watch the false heir, real heir, convenient heir, disappear into the corridor until his footsteps melt into the hush of the fortress. For a long moment, the hallway around you feels stretched thin, like a bowstring pulled to its limit. Then the tension snaps softly, releasing you back into the quiet. You turn away from the tarnished mirror and continue along the hall. The air grows cooler with each step, tinged with the faint musk of damp stone. Eventually, the corridor ends at a spiral staircase descending into the fortress's belly. You take it, feeling the temperature drop further until you emerge in a broad stone chamber dimly lit by a handful of torches. The space is oddly shaped, architecturally confused, like someone kept adding wings to the castle at 3 a.m. without a plan. Corridors branch out in unpredictable angles. Archways lead nowhere, and directly ahead stands something peculiar. A wall. A very large wall, perfectly smooth, too smooth for medieval craftsmanship, curving inward like the inside of a giant bowl. You step closer and run your fingers along the stone. Cool, barely rough, and oddly resonant. When you brush it, the wall hums faintly, like a glass rim touched by a wet fingertip. You blink. Did the wall just sing? A soft scuff behind you makes you turn. A woman, older, robed, holding a candle, appears from a side door. She looks like a caretaker, maybe a custodian of this place. Her candlelight casts her long shadow across the curved wall. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asks, voice steady. You nod slowly. She approaches, careful with each step, candle held close to shield the flame from the draft. "This chamber is older than the rest of the fortress," she says. "They built around it. They had to." She taps the stone gently. It speaks. An echo ripples across the wall, soft, low, haunting. You take a half step back. She smiles faintly. "That's why they call it the castle that spoke. Your outline bullet was right. This place is more rumour than room." She gestures for you to follow her to the far corner, where a line of small, irregular holes dots the lower wall. They look natural at first, like erosion marks, but each one has been shaped deliberately, edges smoothed. "These," she explains, "are the mouths." You raise an eyebrow. "Mouths?" She demonstrates by leaning sideways toward one of the holes. Her lips don't touch it, but she speaks softly into the gap. "Hello." Her voice doesn't echo in the chamber, it whispers across the room. You hear it near your right shoulder, a perfect replica of her voice, carried through the stone. You nearly jump. She chuckles. "Trick of acoustics," she murmurs, or so some say. You crouch beside one of the holes and look more closely. They aren't random, they form a pattern, a grid of sorts. You press your ear near one and hear faint murmurs, too unclear to make out. It's like the wall is a giant whispering gallery. Your mainstream historical fact: some medieval castles did incorporate acoustic tricks, whispering walls, echo chambers, sound funnels, whether by design or lucky accident. In certain chapels and crypts, a whisper at one end could travel audibly to the other. Monks used such spaces to confess quietly. Courtiers used them to spy even more quietly. This room, however, feels less like an accident and more like a conspiracy waiting to happen. The caretaker moves toward a platform rising above the chamber floor. "During the old king's reign," she says, "rumours spread that voices in this hall warned him of danger. Predictions, they called them." Her candle flickers. "He believed the walls spoke." You study her expression. Is she mocking the idea, or mourning it? She continues, "Historians still argue whether those voices were spirit stories, paranoid fictions, or the work of palace factions using these stone mouths." She glances at the curved wall. "Personally, I believe humans speak more often than ghosts." You nod. A safe opinion. You walk the perimeter of the curved wall, tapping lightly. Each spot resonates differently. Hollow here, deep there, sharp in another. It dawns on you. This isn't one wall. It's a layered structure, a shell, with spaces between. Someone could easily hide behind the stone, speak into openings, send warnings or lies throughout the room. A hidden propaganda machine disguised as architecture. You feel the weight of the air shift, and you turn to find someone else entering the chamber. A man, cloaked, with a long staff. His presence startles the caretaker, who stiffens instantly. "You shouldn't be here," she warns him. "The hall is closed," he smiles thinly. "Closed to most." Your instincts tingle, hard. He steps toward the curved wall and lays a hand on it, almost affectionately. "The council meets tonight," he murmurs. "They must hear the message." The caretaker's eyes widen. "Not again," she breathes. "No, you can't." But he's already moving, sweeping his cloak aside to reveal a small leather pouch. He pulls out something metallic, a device with holes like a miniature flute. He presses it against one of the stone mouths and speaks softly into it. His words are too faint to hear, but the effect is immediate. From across the chamber the wall answers, not in his voice, but in a layered echo that sounds ancient, distorted, impossibly resonant. A ghostly tone ripples through the room like someone whispering from inside the stone. You take a step back, goosebumps rising. "So the council hears a warning," the caretaker says, voice trembling. "A false one." He pockets the device. "They'll act on fear. They always do." You realize the implications instantly. If the stone whispers carry through the fortress, if they're echoed in places where councils meet, where advisors gather, then fake messages could steer entire political decisions. War, peace, alliances, arrests. A fortress whose walls speak lies is a dangerous place. You look at the caretaker. "Has anyone else used it?" you ask. Her face tightens. "Too many. For too long." She motions you toward another exit, a quick path away from the chamber. "Be careful in the upper halls tonight," she says quietly. "The decisions made there may not be made by the people you think." As you slip out and climb the stairs again, the last faint echo follows you, one final whisper from the stone. You can't make out the words, but you can feel the warning in them, and you know this conspiracy-laced fortress is far from finished speaking. You climb from the whispering chamber with its eerie, echoing secrets, letting the stone staircase coil upward until the cold begins to soften. The air warms, scented faintly with frankincense and crushed petals, those expensive herbs that medieval royals burned not because they smelled pleasant, but because they suggested, yes, we absolutely have money to waste on fragrant smoke. The corridor widens into a long ceremonial passageway. Tapestries line the walls, vivid reds and deep blues depicting coronations long past. Some figures stand proud and clear, others have faded into ghostly outlines. The woven faces stare back at you with that quiet, regal judgment only dead monarchs can perfect. You move forward, boots brushing over a long runner embroidered with golden threads. It leads toward a double door reinforced with iron and carved with the royal crest. 2 guards flank it, but both are asleep, slumped against their halberds. One snores so softly he could easily be mistaken for an unusually polite dragon. Well, that's convenient. You slip past with a gentle wave of your hand, your signature, "Don't mind me, I'm just narrating my way through your security failures." And then you enter the coronation hall. It's massive. Vaulted ceilings disappear into shadow. Rows of benches flank a central aisle. Torches flicker along the walls, casting tall, dancing silhouettes that look almost alive. And at the far end sits the coronation dais, a raised platform draped in crimson velvet, upon which rests a table. A simple table, covered in cloth, holding a variety of relics. Relics that ought to be heavily guarded. Relics that, historically speaking, have a habit of vanishing at exactly the wrong time. You step closer. There it is. The royal crown. Not the everyday, I rule this castle circlet. The coronation crown. Heavy, embellished, encrusted with enough gemstones to blind a tax collector. And beside it lie the sacred objects used during the ritual. The scepter, the orb, the ceremonial ring, and a few items that may look religious but were definitely chosen because someone wanted the ceremony to feel extra mystical. A hooded figure stands beside the table, carefully rearranging the objects. His movements are precise, too precise. He handles each relic the way one handles fragile illusions. You watch as he lifts the orb, rotates it, and sets it back down, but not in the same place. Slightly angled, slightly off-center. Then he does the same with the scepter, and the ring, and the crown. It looks like he's just fussing with placement, but he isn't adjusting the relics, he's swapping them. A near-identical crown lies hidden beneath the cloth. He pulls it out, examines it, and places it where the real one was. The difference is microscopic. Only a trained eye would see it. A gemstone with a slightly duller gleam. An engraving stroked a little more shallowly. A construction just a touch lighter. Your mainstream historical fact. Medieval coronations involved highly symbolic relics believed to confer legitimacy. A swap, even a tiny one, could cast doubt on a monarch's right to rule. And yes, history records several cases where counterfeit relics were used to challenge or bolster a claim. One disputed crown changed hands 3 times in a single month because nobody could prove who owned the real one. Chaos ensued. Naturally. You shift slightly, and the hooded man freezes. Slowly, like a cat caught reorganizing someone else's bookshelf, he turns. "You saw nothing," he whispers. You raise an eyebrow in the universal expression for, "Really? We're doing this?" He sighs, annoyed. "Fine. Then understand this." He gestures at the relics. Coronations are theatre, symbols. Most of the realm doesn't see the ceremony, they hear about it, and they believe what they're told. He holds up the swapped crown. This crown is identical enough to fool the nobles, but it's lighter, he taps it, weighted differently. "Why?" you ask silently. He appears to read your thought. "Because tonight, they will place the crown upon the head of someone who must not notice the difference." You inhale sharply. The false air. Someone is preparing the coronation hall for him, or for someone else who must be misled. The hooded man moves to another relic, the ceremonial ring. He picks up the original, slips it onto his finger, examines the way it catches the light, then replaces it with a copy. The replica is flawless, except for one tiny detail. The inscription inside is missing 2 letters. Most people would never know, but the Queen will. He mutters, "She'll realize something is wrong. Then she'll question the ritual. Then the ceremony halts." You piece it together. This isn't sabotage meant to crown someone illegitimate. It's sabotage meant to stop a coronation. Historians still argue over medieval coronations interrupted or delayed by sudden controversies with relics. One tale claims a bishop deliberately dropped the scepter mid-ceremony to force a postponement. Another says a counterfeit sword of state nearly launched a civil war. And in one extremely dramatic case, they couldn't locate the correct holy oil, so they just made some, presumably by mixing olive oil with desperation. The hooded man sweeps the cloth aside, revealing a detailed diagram, placement markings for each relic. Lines, measurements, annotations in hurried handwriting. "The Midnight Court knows," he murmurs. You stiffen. That name again. The Midnight Court, the unseen faction pulling strings. He continues, "They want confusion, doubt, a challenge to legitimacy, and if the Queen questions the authenticity of even one relic..." He taps the replica crown again. The entire ceremony unravels. He steps back from the table and looks at you with a strangely gentle expression. "Do not mention this to anyone," he says softly, "unless you wish to watch a kingdom split itself open." He extinguishes the nearest torch and disappears behind a tapestry with the practiced ease of someone who has crawled through more secret passages than a castle mouse. You exhale slowly, letting the coronation hall return to silence. The swapped relics gleam under the flickering torchlight, innocent but ruinously significant. The air feels heavy now, thick with political tension. You move toward the dais, gaze lingering on the counterfeit crown. It looks perfect, regal, radiant, and entirely false. You recall the false heir rehearsing lines in front of a mirror, the strategist coaching him, the envoys who vanished before they could confirm anything, the forgers crafting letters meant to ignite conflict, the merchants funding both sides, the knights swearing secret oaths, and now this. A coronation poised to collapse the moment someone touches the wrong relic. You turn and step back into the corridor. The guards are still asleep. The tapestries still watch you with woven, judgmental eyes. But the path ahead grows darker, and you can feel the fortress bracing for something much bigger than a swapped crown. You slip out of the coronation hall, the counterfeit crown's gleam still lingering in your mind like an afterimage burned by lightning. The corridor outside feels heavier now, weighted by the knowledge that someone has tampered with the very symbols meant to hold this kingdom together. You move softly, letting the hush of the upper halls wrap around you, your boots brushing across carpets thick enough to muffle even the guiltiest footsteps. A turn left, a turn right. And then you sense it before you see it. Warm light spilling from a half-open doorway, soft murmurs, a distinct perfume, amber and rosewater, with that unmistakable metallic undercurrent of authority. You pause. This must be the Queen's private council chamber. The door is carved with intricate vines, each leaf sharpened into an almost blade. You push it open with only a fingertip, and a slice of gold light widens across your face. A large circular table fills the center of the chamber, strewn with maps, letters, half-finished diagrams, and cups of tea that have clearly been refilled more often than anyone slept. But it's the people inside who pull your gaze. The Queen herself stands near the head of the table, a tall woman with a posture carved out of equal parts grace and exhaustion. Her hair is bound in silver-threaded braids, and her cloak hangs from her shoulders like a storm about to break. 3 advisors stand beside her, their expressions wary, parchment in hand. And, oddly, there are more figures here than you'd expect. 2 guards who don't wear standard livery, a court physician, a monk, a merchant, all gathered not by accident but by design. A secret council, meeting at night, the Queen's nightly council. You slip along the edge of the room, careful to keep to the shadows cast by tall bookcases. The Queen speaks low, but her voice carries with the sharpness of someone who's run out of patience. 3 envoys gone, she says. 1 false papal letter, grain shipments manipulated, knights meeting in the training yard, and these, She slams a rolled document onto the table. These forged relic assessments circulate among the nobles. An advisor clears his throat nervously. Your Majesty, the midnight court grows bolder. The phrase tightens the room. The Queen inhales slowly, closing her eyes. They were supposed to be myth. Most dangerous myths, the monk murmurs, are simply conspiracies old enough to grow polite. You almost snort aloud. That line has big monk who gives surprisingly spicy advice energy. The physician steps forward next. Your Majesty, the illnesses in the upper ward. Some show signs of plague, yes, but others... He hesitates. Others appear staged. Ah, yes. The plague carts, the tampered herbs. You feel your shoulders tense. The Queen rubs her temples. We are being surrounded on all fronts by shadows, lies, and whispers. One advisor leans close to her, speaking too quietly for others to hear. Except you, because he doesn't realize you're basically honorary wallpaper tonight. The coronation cannot proceed, he whispers, not with the relics in question. Your eyebrows nearly launch into orbit. The Queen's expression sharpens. You think someone tampered with them? Yes, Your Majesty. He places a hand on the table. And if the wrong person tries to claim the throne tonight... Ah, the false heir again. Everything keeps curling back to him like a conspiracy boomerang. The Queen straightens abruptly. I will meet him myself. The room freezes. A merchant, bold enough to speak up, says, Majesty, if he is your late brother's son, then he would never sneak into my fortress at night, she snaps. He would come openly with witnesses. A fair point, another advisor interjects. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but he carries the ring, the signet. The Queen's gaze turns steely. Anyone can forge a ring. It takes more skill to forge the memories of a child. She turns to the monk. You? You knew my brother best. If this man carries his resemblance... The monk flinches. I will do my best to confirm or deny. Historians still argue whether medieval courts relied on physical resemblance to verify heirs, or whether memories, documents, and political convenience carried more weight. Probably convenience. Definitely convenience. A guard in unfamiliar uniform clears his throat. My Queen, with respect, should the midnight court suspect you plan to unmask the pretender, they may intervene. They already have, she says softly. Everyone looks at her. The Queen lifts a folded parchment from the table. This was slipped beneath my door. She unfolds it, hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with fury. You edge closer. The writing is elegant, slanted, deliberately neat. It reads, If the crown is placed upon the wrong head, the realm will bleed. Trust only the hour between moonrise and moonset. The midnight court watches. The room goes silent. You feel your scalp prickle. The Queen folds the note. They warn me, threaten me, or both. But I will not let phantoms rule this kingdom. An advisor steps forward. Majesty, if the coronation is postponed... She shakes her head. Postponing gives power to rumour. Proceeding gives power to manipulation. Her voice lowers. Either way, I lose. A long, uneasy quiet follows. Then the court physician speaks. There is another option. All eyes turn. He gestures subtly toward the shadows near the window. You lean in. We let the pretender speak, he says. Test him. Question him before the council. If he falters, the truth will show. And if he does not, the Queen asks. The physician hesitates. Then perhaps he deserves to be heard. The Queen considers this. Slowly she nods. Prepare the oratory. Everyone scatters. Advisors grabbing documents. Guards slipping out via side. Doors. The monk muttering prayers that sound more like stress management techniques. You remain in the shadows as the Queen pulls a thick ledger from the table. She flips open to a page covered in crude drawings. Children's sketches made with charcoal. One child drawn tall, one short. 2 smiling faces. A little map. A dog with 3 legs. Innocent, crude, but deeply personal. These, she whispers, were the only things my brother kept after the siege. Her voice softens further. If the man truly is his son, he will remember at least one drawing. You feel a tug in your chest, a quiet ache. She closes the book, steels herself, and heads toward the oratory. Her nightly council disperses completely now. The chamber empties, the torches dim. You step into the centre of the room, letting the moment settle over you. You've walked through conspiracies built on ink, plague, coin, oaths, forged letters, echoing walls, whispering choirs, and now the Queen herself stands on the edge of a decision that could fracture or fortify the realm. Whatever happens next will hinge on a meeting at moonrise, and moonrise isn't far away. You slip out of the Queen's chamber and into a hallway washed in pale, ghostly moonlight. The air has changed, cooler, thinner, trembling with anticipation. Somewhere above you, bells murmur the hour. Somewhere below, echo chambers whisper. And somewhere outside, beyond the fortress walls, rumours of a phantom army drift like smoke over the countryside. You head toward the battlements, following a sharp breeze that tugs insistently at your cloak. The corridor bends, widens, and finally spills you onto an open rampart walkway. The wind hits you instantly. Cold, clean, carrying the scents of pine, river water, and distant smoke. Torches gutter along the parapets, their flames fighting the gusts like exhausted soldiers. Guards patrol here, though fewer than you'd expect. Some huddle near the towers, whispering in low voices. Others stare out at the dark horizon with the hollow-eyed intensity of people convinced something big is coming. And you can feel it too, a pressure in the night, a hush before the storm, a weight that settles on the shoulders like an invisible cloak. You approach a cluster of guards gathered near the northern wall. They stand in a half-circle, staring downward into the valley. Their expressions are stiff, wary, and etched with the same phrase you've been hearing all night. It's out there. You follow their gaze. The valley stretches beneath the moon, misted, silvered, strangely silent. Your eyes adjust. Then you see it. Movement. Shadows. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They shift like a drifting tide, rising, falling, clustering, separating, forming shapes that might be marching ranks, or wandering animals, or tricks of the moon. It's hard to tell where silhouettes end and imagination begins. Is that? You whisper. A guard answers without looking away. The army, another adds, voice trembling. The one that's never arrived, but everyone keeps seeing. Ah, yes. The main headline of tonight's outline, the siege that never happened. The Phantom Army, your mainstream historical fact. Medieval chronicles do record sightings of ghost armies or rumoured forces gathering in forests, ravines, or old battlegrounds. Sometimes they were tricks of fog, sometimes enemy scouts exaggerating their numbers, and sometimes, let's be honest, extreme sleep deprivation paired with terrible torches. But more than once, rulers mobilised defences against armies that were never actually there. Tonight, you appear to be staring at one. The guard captain approaches, rubbing his eyes with a mixture of fury and fatigue. We've sent scouts 3 times, he says. Nobody sees anything up close, but from the walls... He gestures sharply. There. You've seen them move? You ask silently. He nods. Some say they're mercenaries gathering to lay siege. Some say rebels from the north. Some say spirits. His lip curls. Spirits don't cast shadows. You watch another ripple of movement. But the longer you stare, the more your certainty dissolves. They look like soldiers, but no sound rises. No clank of armour, no horns, no campfires flickering, just the shifting dark. One guard grips the parapet with white knuckles. If they attack by dawn, we're unprepared. Half our knights are missing. Supplies moved without explanation. Envoys gone. And the Queen, his voice lowers. She waits for a pretender to present himself. Yes, the perfect night for panic. A junior guard jogs up the stairs, short of breath. Captain, a rider claims he saw movement near the river ford. Says the army's real. The captain growls. Which rider? The guard hesitates. One of the grain merchant's men. You almost laugh, not because it's funny, but because of course a merchant would send a rider to confirm the existence of an army that might disrupt trade. Merchants love being first with news, even if the news is imaginary. The captain curses under his breath. They want us scared, he mutters. Someone benefits if the Queen believes we're already surrounded. A pause. Could be the Midnight Court, another guard whispers. There it is again. That name flapping its wings over everything. You take a few steps along the wall, leaving the cluster of guards behind. Trumpets do not sound. Torches do not glint off helmets. Yet the valley looks alive. You study the terrain more closely. The moon glints off something. Water? Metal? Eyes? Hard to say. You narrow your gaze at one cluster of shadows. They sway oddly. too fluid for humans. You lean further, squinting. Then it clicks. Tall grass. You exhale sharply, nearly laugh. The movement comes from the wind pushing through high, silver-grey grass. Large patches growing in irregular swaths. In the moonlight, the grass sways in waves, clustering and dispersing like marching figures. And the shadows, long stems. Their movement from a distance mimics bodies shifting ranks. You lean back, processing this. A phantom army created by vegetation and moonlight. Not the first time nature trolled a medieval fortress. Your quirky historical tidbit lands right on time. Chroniclers noted cases where flocks of migrating birds or grazing deer were mistaken for invading armies. One famous account describes an entire kingdom preparing for war against a distant field of scarecrows. Historians still chuckle about that one. You glance around. But the trick doesn't end with grass. Torches flicker, shadows stretch, fog curls low, and someone clever, has placed reflective shields or plates near the valley floor. You spot one glinting faintly. When the moon hits it just right, it flashes like metal moving in formation. This isn't just natural illusion. This is engineered deception, a deliberately crafted phantom army. Suddenly footsteps skid behind you. A breathless scout rushes up the parapet. "Captain," he yells, "the Queen requests all patrol captains in the oratory now. She wants to discuss the siege." The captain grimaces. "The siege won't happen, because it doesn't exist." "But the report," he snaps, "was written to be believed." You feel a chill, not from the wind, from the realization tying everything together. If the Queen believes she's surrounded, she'll delay the coronation, delay action, delay the confrontation with the pretender, delay any decision that might stabilize the realm. And who benefits from chaos? The Midnight Court, the Shadow Merchants, the Forged Letter Syndicate, the Nightly Oathbreakers, everyone thriving in uncertainty. You step back from the wall, letting the night settle around you. The valley still shifts in its eerie choreography, strangely beautiful now that you understand it. As you turn to leave, the captain stops you with a glance. "Whatever you do," he says softly, "don't spread the word. If half the fortress realizes they've been frightened by grass and moonshine," he sighs, "we'll never hear the end of it. Fair." You descend the ramparts, heading back into the fortress. Behind you, the phantom army continues its silent march, whispering in the language of wind and shadow, an illusion powerful enough to sway councils, delay coronations, and ignite conspiracies. And as you return to the dim corridor, one truth settles over you. The real armies in this fortress aren't outside the walls, they're already inside. You leave the ramparts with the phantom army fading into a shifting mirage behind you, your footsteps guiding you back into the warmer, earthier parts of the fortress. The air changes quickly, cool stone giving way to the scent of soil, leaves, and fermenting grape skins. Not the sweet, romantic vineyard smell from travel brochures. This is the rustic, slightly sour aroma of medieval agriculture, where wine is basically grapes that survived questionable decisions. The corridor slopes downward until you reach an archway opening onto a quiet courtyard. Moonlight blankets rows of trellises stretching toward the outer wall. It's a vineyard, small but well kept, tucked into the fortress grounds like a secret garden carved from the night. Neat lines of grapevines twist along wooden stakes, their leaves rustling softly. It should feel peaceful. Should. But the outline has been very clear with you all night. Nothing here is just what it seems. A pair of figures crouches between the rows, speaking in hushed tones. One holds pruning shears, the other clutches a ledger. Both wear cloaks thrown too casually to be mere farmers. You step closer, boots sinking softly into loose dirt, and ease behind a rain barrel to listen. "Any word from the riders?" the ledger holder whispers. "Not yet. The last message said the Queen is preparing to test the pretender." The pruning shear figure snorts. He won't pass. He barely remembers his own story. A shame. He had potential. Potential. Interesting choice of words for someone impersonating an heir. You ease around a trellis, tracing the dry, scraggly vines. Your mainstream historical fact lands right on cue. Medieval vineyards, especially those run by noble estates, often doubled as intelligence networks. Wine growers travelled between estates, listened to gossip, whispered news, and traded secrets as easily as they traded barrels. Some carried coded messages carved into cork stoppers, or hidden inside hollowed grape clusters. Yes, people really hollowed grapes. Dedication to the craft. As you creep closer, a soft whistle slices through the air. 3 short notes, followed by a click. The figures freeze. The whisk of footsteps approaches from the far end of the vineyard. Then a shadow leaps lightly over a fence. A slim woman in travel-stained clothes, cloak pinned by a wooden brooch shaped like a grape leaf. She dusts her hands, strides forward, and nods to the others. Report. The ledger holder holds up his parchment. 2 envoys still missing. The 3rd confirmed dead, she grimaces. Which our friends will blame on plague, I assume. Already spreading the rumour, yes. She exhales sharply and glances toward the fortress windows glowing faintly with torchlight. And the Queen? Gathering her council at moonset, she nods. Good, gives us time. Time? For what? You lean a little closer. She kneels beside a vine, lifts a cluster of grapes, and reveals something you didn't expect. A tiny slip of parchment tied beneath the leaves with thread. A message. She unties it, reads quickly, and hands it to the ledger holder. Send this to the lower docks. They'll know what to do. You feel your suspicion spike. Messages hidden in vineyards. Couriers disguised as growers. Coordinated signals. You've walked into another network entirely. The vineyard spy rings. Quirky historical tidbit. Some medieval vintners used grapevines as drop points for coded notes. Thin slips hidden where only a knowledgeable eye would find them. A travelling wine merchant could collect dozens of messages during routine inspections, all under the pretense of checking the harvest. The woman taps the dirt with her boot. Everything hinges on what happens tonight. If the false heir convinces even one high-ranking council member, the pruning shears man interrupts. Then the midnight court gains legitimacy. You stiffen. Again that name, always swimming just below the surface, as though the whole fortress is their fishbowl. She lowers her voice. They've been planting seeds for months, false letters, false relics, false omens, all pushing toward this moment. She points toward the castle's heart. If the coronation is delayed, they move forward. If it proceeds with a fake heir, they move forward. If the Queen rejects him publicly, they still move forward, the ledger holder finishes. A beat of silence, she frowns. We need leverage. The pruning shears man gestures toward the trellis. We have some, the steward's letters, the alchemist's reports. Not enough, she says. We need truth, not rumours, not speculation, something the Queen cannot ignore. You step back, absorbing this. These people aren't working with the midnight court, they're working against them. The vineyard spies aren't saboteurs, they're trying to protect the crown. Interesting, and helpful. Literally everyone else tonight has been morally ambiguous or just aggressively shady. The woman reaches into her cloak and pulls out a small wax tablet. She scratches a quick message across its surface, then hands it to the ledger holder. Send a runner to the astrologer, she instructs. Tell him the false army has been confirmed as an illusion. You choke on your own silent gasp. They know. They know about the phantom army, the mirrors, the grass. Will he believe it? The ledger holder asks. He's the one who warned us the star's warnings were being altered. She sighs. He'll believe it. The vineyard rustles with a sudden gusty wind, shaking loose a few dried leaves. The woman looks sharply toward the fortress doors. Someone's coming. The 3 snap into motion, ledgers tucked away, tools hidden, masks of farmers snapped into place. They scatter across the vineyard, returning to positions where they look like hard-working night gardeners, instead of covert operatives trying to save a kingdom. Footsteps crunch through gravel, the heavy tired gait of someone who doesn't know a spy ring is watching him. A middle-aged noble, his cloak askew, wanders in grumbling about the Queen's late-night council. He doesn't even notice the 3 spies melting into the shadows. He mutters to himself, pacing. If the heir is real, the Queen loses influence. If he's false, the nobles lose patience. If that blasted midnight court keeps meddling, he sighs loudly. We're doomed either way. Mood. He wanders out again, shaking his head. You step from your hiding spot and the vine-leaf brooch woman emerges once more. Eyes on you immediately. You've been listening, she says softly. You shrug. What else is new? She approaches you with the cautious respect of someone who has read your entire night like a ledger. I don't know who you are, she murmurs, but you've walked into more circles tonight than most spies manage in a season. You tilt your head, silently asking, And what do you want from me?" She smiles faintly. "Only this. When the queen meets the pretender, watch the monk. His reaction will tell you more than any relic." She steps back into the vines. And remember, truth grows in shadows before it grows in daylight. A poetic flourish for a vineyard spy, honestly. She disappears among the trellises, leaving you alone under the moonlit rose. You turn back toward the fortress, dirt crunching beneath your boots. The night hums around you, a chorus of conspiracies, each thread weaving tighter. The Phantom Army wasn't real, but everything else very much is, and you're getting dangerously close to the heart of it. You leave the vineyard with the spy leader's parting words echoing in your mind. Watch the monk. The advice settles somewhere deep, like a seed ready to sprout exactly when things get interesting. And judging by the way the fortress seems to be holding its breath, interesting is only a few steps away. You climb a quiet back stair, the kind servants use to avoid crossing paths with irritated nobles. The air grows cool and dry again, dustier, filled with the faint smell of old parchment. You recognize this scent. It's the kind that clings to places meant for storing knowledge too valuable, or too dangerous, to leave in public view. Eventually you arrive at a narrow hallway ending in an iron-bound door. A small lantern burns beside it. No guards, no courtiers, just silence. You push the door open. Inside is a library so old it feels like the fortress built around it rather than the other way around. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, bowed under the weight of manuscripts written in every shade of ink imaginable. Loose scrolls spill from cubbies. Thick books lie open on lecterns as though abandoned mid-thought. The air hums with the softest whisper, pages shifting as if breathing. This is the librarian's domain. More importantly, this is where the outline promised the librarian's last cipher. You step inside, letting the door fall shut behind you. Dust motes drift lazily through lantern light like tiny, aimless fairies. You weave between high shelves until you reach the central desk, a sprawling slab of oak buried beneath parchment stacks. Atop one pile rests a quill, snapped in half. Next to it lies an overturned inkwell, its spill long dried into flaking rivulets. And behind the desk, slumped in a chair, sits a man. You stiffen, not dead, thankfully, but asleep. Exhausted. His head rests on a stack of papers, breath slow, hands still clutching a rolled parchment as though he passed out mid-sentence. A librarian doing overtime. Relatable energy. You inch closer, careful not to wake him. The parchment under his hand looks out of place, finer vellum than the rest, wrapped with a cord that's frayed from nervous twisting. You gently slide it free. The seal is broken. Not recently. Perhaps hours ago. You unroll it slowly. The parchment is covered in writing, but not normal writing. Letters scatter across the page in spirals, diagonals, circles. Some overlap, some mirror each other. At first glance it looks chaotic, like someone spilled the alphabet and tried to scoop it back together. But then patterns emerge, shapes forming between the letters, lines connecting them invisibly. A cipher. Your mainstream historical fact slips neatly into place. Medieval scholars, monks, and librarians often use substitution ciphers and encoded diagrams to protect sensitive information, especially political secrets, forbidden texts, or messages they didn't trust to ordinary messengers. Some were simple, others so complex only their creators could decode them. A few remain unsolved today. This one feels deliberate, urgent. You trace the circular pattern with your finger. Letters repeat at intervals, every 7th stroke. A word appears when you read outward from the center. Midnight. Another ring forms a second word. Court. Of course, your best frenemy tonight. But there's more. You lean closer, following the spirals, and gradually pull out phrases hidden like threads in a tapestry. False heir, engineered. Envoys silenced. Relics compromised. Stars manipulated. And then a chilling one. Voice in walls. Hours. You swallow hard. So the Midnight Court has been using the acoustic chamber. And not as some occasional prank, they use it strategically, shaping the Queen's fears with prophecies. But one phrase stands out more than the rest. Written larger, pressed harder into the vellum. The ink is darker, the pressure points deeper. Stop coronation or fall. You exhale slowly. This isn't just a record of what they've done, it's instructions, a plan. And someone wanted it hidden in the library, where only the librarian might understand it. You turn as the sleeping man stirs. His eyes flutter open, heavy, clouded with exhaustion, but sharp enough to lock onto the parchment in your hands. "You found it," he whispers. His voice is old, papery, yet threaded with a quiet resolve. He pushes himself upright with effort. "I meant to hide it before they came again." His gaze drifts toward the door, frightened. But they were faster. You tilt your head silently, urging him to continue. He braces himself on the desk. "I gathered these clues for months, notes the scribes hid, fragments monks dropped, letters merchants never meant to lose. Everything pointed to one truth." He gestures weakly at the cipher. "They've infiltrated every circle, every guild, every whisper." Your pulse quickens. The librarian's fingers tremble as he taps one line near the edge of the parchment, a phrase woven into the cipher's outermost ring. "One truth unravels all." You lean closer. "What is it?" you whisper aloud in your mind. He inhales shakily. "The Midnight Court needs the Queen to doubt herself, needs the crown disputed, needs the nobles divided, needs the people confused." His expression tightens. "But most of all, they need the past rewritten." Past rewritten. That sounds like a scribe's trick, a forged heir, a swapped relic, a faked crusade letter. Everything fits. But the librarian lifts another note, a smaller one, written in hurried hand. This one says, "The pretender does not know the truth." You blink. Does not know? So he isn't part of the Midnight Court. The librarian hushes you with a gesture, as though reading your thoughts. They're using him, a pawn. He believes his own story only because they've written it around him. That hits you like a cold wind. The pretender isn't a mastermind. He's a victim. And the Midnight Court, they're building a narrative through him, shaping history before it happens. The librarian coughs weakly and nods toward a shelf behind him. There is more. You help him up, steadying his weight. Together you walk toward the tall shelf, where a single book lies pulled partway out. You slide it free. Its cover bears no title. But inside, the pages are filled with old letters, real letters, exchanged between the Queen's brother and his closest confidants. You skim them. One thing becomes clear within seconds. He never had a child. Not secretly, not publicly, not at all. You feel your heartbeat quicken, and suddenly Section 13's careful coaching, the forged evidence, the staged memories all snap into sharp focus. The Midnight Court created an heir, fabricated him, raised him in secrecy, fed him a story, released him at the perfect moment, a person so convinced of his origin that he could convince others. The librarian closes his eyes, voice barely above a whisper. They needed a face, a symbol, someone to claim legitimacy when they seized the crown in his name. Your skin prickles. This is the truth, the one truth that unravels all. If the Queen learns her nephew is a fiction, the Midnight Court's entire plan collapses, but only if she hears it first. The librarian slumps into his chair, exhausted. "Go," he murmurs. "Take it to her. The Midnight Court is already in motion. If they intercept you..." He doesn't finish. You roll the cipher gently, tucking it safely away. Then you slip toward the door. Just before you leave, the librarian calls after you. "Remember, truth is sharpest before dawn." You pull the door open and step into the corridor. The path ahead darkens. The final confrontation draws near. You leave the library with the librarian's cipher folded tight against your chest, its inked spirals pressing faintly through the parchment like a heartbeat. Every corridor feels narrower now, every torch too dim, every shadow a little more ambitious than before. The fortress hums, alive, alert, shifting under the weight of a truth sharp enough to split a kingdom. And you're walking straight into its center. Your boots catch whispers with each step. Servants muttering, guards snapping at each other, doors opening and closing too quickly. The Queen's oratory lies ahead, a gentle curve of a room carved into the upper reach of the keep. The route there feels longer than it did earlier, as though the stone itself is dragging the suspense out. You round the final corner. A lone guard stands outside the oratory door, lean, tense, trying to look professional but radiating, "I deeply regret being scheduled for this shift." He barely glances at you before stiffening, eyes widening slightly. "You're early," he whispers. You tilt your head. "Early for what?" He swallows. "The Queen hasn't arrived yet, but the man has." The Pretender. A hollow knock echoes from behind the door. 2, then 1. A pattern of hesitation. The guard steps aside, shaking his head. "Go on, if you dare. I'm not stopping anyone tonight." You slip inside. The Queen's oratory is smaller than you imagined, circular with stone alcoves holding candles that cast a warm, trembling glow. A single, stained glass window overlooks the valley, its colours muted in the moonlight. A modest lectern stands at the centre, and beside it, hands clasped, cloak pulled tight, breathing anxiously, stands the man. The false heir. No, the fabricated heir. He doesn't see you at first. He's rehearsing again, mouthing each line silently, shoulders stiff with doubt. He looks younger here, without the strategist, without the ring glinting dramatically, without the moonlit mirror to strike poses in. Just a man in a room too big for his borrowed story. Then he notices you. "You again," he says, voice soft. You don't move. He looks away, ashamed. "I know what you're thinking, that I don't belong here, that I'm a fraud." He swallows. "You're probably right." You step closer, slowly. He pulls the ring off, rolling it between his fingers. "I didn't ask for this. They found me in the mountains, said I looked like him." His laugh is hollow. "Said I had royal blood, said I had a duty." He rubs his forehead. It felt good, belonging somewhere, being someone. You remember what the librarian said? He believes his own story. You also remember the Queen's words. Anyone can forge a ring. It takes more skill to forge the memories of a child. Footsteps echo in the corridor. The Queen is coming. The Pretender straightens instantly, heart pounding loud enough that you almost hear it. He stuffs the ring back on and steps toward the lectern, but you place a hand gently on the parchment hidden in your cloak. This is the moment. The Queen enters. Moonlight halos her silhouette as she steps inside, flanked by her monk advisor and 2 guards. Her gaze lands on the Pretender with the weight of a storm. He bows deeply. "Your Majesty." She says nothing. Instead, she motions for the guards to seal the door. The click echoes through the chamber. Then she turns to the monk, the one the vineyard spy warned you to watch. "Brother Alaric," she says calmly, "you knew my brother better than anyone. Tell me, is this man his son?" The monk steps forward. The Pretender tenses. You watch the monk's face carefully. His eyes move slowly, too slowly, from the man's hairline to his jaw, to the ring he wears. His expression doesn't soften with recognition. You notice something. His hands shake, barely, but enough to betray him. He's hiding something, and then his lips part. "Yes," he says, "a lie. Bold, smooth, practiced." You inhale sharply. The Queen's eyes narrow. "How can you be certain?" The monk answers quickly. "He has the signet, and he bears the resemblance." The Queen's gaze darkens. But not the memory. Silence. A long silence. The Pretender's throat tightens. "Your Majesty, The Queen silences him with a raised hand. "My brother kept drawings. Memories from childhood. Only someone who knew him as a boy would recall them." She produces the ledger, thick, worn, and filled with sketches. She opens to a page. A childlike drawing of 2 boys holding sticks like swords. A lopsided dog. A small house with smoke curling sideways. The Queen places the ledger on the lectern. "Describe this day," she commands. The Pretender stares, struggles. His lips part, close, part again. His eyes dart between the monk and the Queen, panic building in his face. He can't, because he doesn't know. The Queen's eyes flick to the monk, and that's when you sense it. Her suspicion sharpens. She steps closer to him. "Alaric," she says softly, "how did you recognize the boy's son? When you never knew the boy?" The monk freezes. The room stills. The Queen's voice hardens. "You took vows at the monastery after the siege. You never met my brother before adulthood." The Pretender turns slowly, realization dawning. The monk swallows hard. "Your Majesty, you lied," she says. You sense the midnight court's influence pulsing through him like a shadow, and that's your cue. You step forward, unfolding the cipher. The parchment catches the candlelight, revealing its spirals, its coded threads, its damning truth. The Queen's eyes widen. What is that? You hand it to her. She scans the page. Her breath stops. Her gaze snaps to the monk. You helped them. His mask collapses. Your Majesty, please? You helped the Midnight Court create a false heir. You silenced envoys. You manipulated oaths. You fed me prophecies. Her voice rises, quiet but sharp. You tried to crown a lie. The monk falls to his knees. I thought the kingdom needed a new beginning. A stronger line. Enough. The Queen's voice silences the room. She turns to the pretender. You were used, she says gently. Not by me, not by fate, by men who wanted a throne they could control. Tears rim the man's eyes. I never wanted to deceive you. The Queen's expression softens. Not much, but enough. Then start by telling the truth. About everything you know. The man nods, shoulders trembling. Guards seize the monk, dragging him away as he pleads for forgiveness that isn't coming. The Queen inhales deeply, steadying herself. This changes everything, she murmurs. You feel it too. A shift, a release, a breath drawn after too long beneath water. She looks at you, not recognizing you, yet acknowledging you in a way that feels grateful. Thank you, she says quietly. Then she turns to the pretender. We begin again, with truth. The tension in the room loosens like a knot undone. You step back, into the corridor, the oratory door closing softly behind you. A cool wind sweeps through the hall. The night exhales. Your journey through the fortress of conspiracies has reached its final torch. You move through the dim corridor, each step slower now, softer, as though the fortress itself is easing its long-held breath. The torches burn low, their warm glow stretching across the stone in wide, gentle pools of amber. The air feels different, calmer, smoother, as if the heavy layers of deceit threaded through these halls have finally begun to lift. You take a moment to pause, letting your hand rest on the cool surface of the wall, feeling the faint heartbeat of the castle settle into something steady and safe. Outside, the moon drifts behind a thin cloud, dimming the silver pools of light that once threw shadows into marching armies. Even the wind seems to soften, brushing past you in long, unbroken sighs. Somewhere far below, a single bell rings, a slow, soothing chime that seems more like a lullaby than a signal. Conversations have faded, hurried footsteps have stilled, and only the distant hush of rustling vines stirs in the vineyard beyond the curtain walls. You breathe in deeply, letting the quiet weave its way around you. The conspirators, the whispers, the secrets. They all feel distant now, fading into the spaces between candle flames and the slow cradle of night. A calm settles over the fortress, the kind that arrives only after truth has finally been spoken. As you return toward your room, your safe corner of this sprawling stronghold, you feel your own steps become lighter, slower, almost draped in sleep. The world narrows to the soft hush of your breath, the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, the gentle glow of the final lantern flickering near your door. And as you slip inside, blankets soft and cool, eyes growing heavy, the last whispers of the fortress fade completely, leaving only quiet, only peace, only rest.